Okay.
For sure. Marcus, one of the classic Jagans, Iron Sword, Silver Lance. We should show off the stats.
Yeah, super useful early on, and later on, honestly, still pretty useful character. Like, his growth rates are garbo, but even in normal mode, he holds up pretty well, even in the long term. In hard mode, not so much, but there's still like reasons to deploy him later on if you wanted to. But early chapters, I would never recommend playing the early chapters without Marcus. He's so good.
Yeah, he's vital.
So I put Roy like in range of these dudes. Roy's like, I think he gets 2-shot by these guys, like barely survives a hit, but he does come out on top against the 2 HP fighter, I guess. Stats aren't like super impressive or anything, but they sort of work for this point in the game. I've never been too impressed with Roy as a Lord. I think he's known as like one of the worst ones in the history. I don't think that's completely earned. There are some things that he can do, but I'm not gonna lie, he is not the easiest one to use. He does not stand out in a whole lot of ways. The big thing that holds him back is promoting so late, only having swords as an option to attack with, which in this game is generally fine, but combined with these stats, it just doesn't really work very well. Strength and speed just don't excel very much, and I think it's like a poster child of FE6's problem of just not having super high growth rates compared to later games like Awakening and Fates and Three Houses. It just comes out looking mediocre, but he is serviceable, and I think we'll be training him along the way just to make sure that he can survive, because he's got a... I think there's some parts in the game where it's just super nice to have a Roy with actual stats. It doesn't get obliterated by everything in this way. I don't know what you think about that, but that's kind of my take on Roy, in short.
On Roy, I think Roy is one of the strongest lords pre-Awakening.
Oh, hold up. Hot takes coming in.
No, I'm serious. For a lot of reasons. For one, being sword locked is actually pretty fine in this game. The 1-2 range is good, but it's not as excellent as it was in, say, like FE7 or FE8. And that does also mean he gets access to a lot of great tools, such as Armor Slayer, Worm Slayer, Light Brand, even the Lance Reaver too. And he doesn't need to always hold onto these items. He can just trade them away from other people around him. One of the big X factors in Roy's favor is the fire affinity for the support. The fact that he can provide this to some of the strongest units in the game, Marcus, Lance, Allen, means that he ends up providing a ton of utility just to a lot of the strongest characters in your army all the time. Even Shanna, I think he has a support with.
That's true.
And we can maybe later on get to how much we want to use supports in this playthrough. I personally use them a lot when I play, but I mostly play like casual and speedrun. I've not done LTC, where you can't really afford to build supports.
No, that's fair.
Well,
I think supports are like, they take a while to build up, of course, but when you do have them, they are a savior. I did use supports a lot with Roy on my first hard mode playthroughs. It was actually like a really big point in his favor. That's true. It's just a matter of, do you want to spend the time building them? Which, I mean, there's no real penalty for doing so. It's just kind of boring sometimes, but it really helps if you're struggling. We're actually messing around with this earlier, and Lyn had like the speed to double because she had her Hector mode bases from FE7, but it turns out without those, she's actually not as capable of surviving hits or doubling. So we have to hold her back into, like, for later. Just kind of
she doesn't get one shot by that guy. That's actually shocking.
Yeah, I know, right? She's, I mean, these are her Lyn mode stats by default. They're not fantastic or anything. I think with 1 or 2 points of speed, she will double every fighter. 1 point will double some fighters, and then she'll be, like, rolling off. I think Lyn will be really interesting to play with in this game, because I think the reason Lyn is like considered worse in FE7 as like one of the worst units is because, not necessarily because her stats are terrible all around or because a unit like her could never work, but because the context of FE7 just works against Lyn. And I think that's kind of similar to how you said Roy being sword locked in FE6 doesn't hurt him as much as some of the later lords. I don't agree with he's like one of the strongest lords, but I do think that this game works better for Roy than FE7 works for Eliwood, because weak sword lock in this game is not as bad, because weapon by hit matters a lot more. Speed thresholds are harder to hit, so it's easier for Lyn to start double attacking compared to other characters. She doesn't have a crit bonus or anything like Rutger does. That's like the other reason Swordmaster is so good, but being able to hit accurately against enemies with more avoid is going to be very nice. And of course the Manakete in this game, in FE7 it's only double effectiveness, but in this game it's triple effectiveness. FE7 Japanese, it's double effectiveness, but in this game it's going to be triple. Or in Japanese version of FE7, it's triple, and it's going to be in this game as well, which will be super nice for her when we get to Cavaliers. Of course, she won't be effective against Nomads and Valkyries, because of the Rapier is the same issue in this game. I think it's kind of a bug, but I didn't want to fix it, because I didn't want to make this game too different from vanilla. But I think Lyn is going to be fantastic in situations. There will be situations where she's kind of bad, I think, but she won't be as like annoying to use as she is sometimes in FE7. Yeah, we can't use Roy here, but we can use a Christmas Cav. They're like pretty good actually. Which one do you like more, Allen or Lance?
Lance and Alan, whichever one gets the better level ups.
No, that's true. That's how I plan on treating them as well. Just use one of them, and hopefully one of them will snowballs out of control. I think these units are good situationally. I used to think they were broken good, and now I just think they're good generally because of a lack of better units for the most part. But they can grow really well. The main issue with using both, I find, is that there's only one Night Crest available quickly, and the other one has to wait a pretty long time to promote. And whichever one promotes kind of is pretty good, but the other one just kind of falls behind and just doesn't end up as well. But their stats overall are decent. Not so great that they like double everything or two-shot everything. Alan will generally two-shot but not double. Lance will generally start doubling at some point, but not two-shot things. Depends on the mode too. Like if you're playing normal mode, then Alan will two-shot almost everything and Lance will double almost everything from the start. Hard mode, they're a little bit further behind the curve. But once they get going, they're pretty decent, and I like them a lot. And the supports that you mentioned also help them a lot. They get a lot of like avoid and hit and attack and everything from them. That's been my experience with them.
Yeah, for sure. And Alan's affinity is definitely better suited to that. I think Lance's is more defensive. The fire affinity is actually just outrageous. It's what full offensive stuff. So plus attack, plus hit, plus crit, and then also plus avoid, because why not? I think. Well, what I usually do. We'll see if this ends up being what we do here. What I usually do is, again, just use both, see which one ends up better. That's the one who gets the early Night Crest. And the one who doesn't get the early Night Crest just, gets the bench for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a tool you can always use. And I do frequently use it in Fire Emblem 6.
I agree with that. I think it's still wise to build up like a bit of support, at least for the early game. If we can get it, great. If not, whatever. Twice, we'll just have Walt get the village. We haven't really used him very much. Because look at the stats, that's why we don't use him very much.
No.
I actually find him like
carrying a bomb, but
he is. I think he's actually like useful in the early on because you do want to chip people often, but when you have Marcus weaken everyone for you, it's not really relevant right now. But later chapters where you don't have Marcus able to do everything, sometimes you need to gang up on enemies to slowly chip them down and get the kill with one person. But you'd like 4 people to take one person down, and one of those 4 people can often be Walt in hard mode. But right now, just look at the stats. They're just not very good. He's not doing a whole lot of damage. But I will say in this game, bows are pretty good to have around. And it's one of the reasons why I also think Lyn might be good. Is she promotes and gets bows. She will be able to shoot people from a distance and avoid all the strong counterattacks from the enemies. And Walt is useful for similar reasons. But there are better bow users in this game that we'll get later on that will make much better utility, much better use of those better bows.
yeah, for sure. I've used Walt a few times. I was currently going through a low tier run, and even in that, Walt got benched. Even as I was using only the worst half of the units of the game, I'm running around the whole Treck Noah. I deployed Barth on a couple maps, and Walt's getting benched in that one. He's pretty rubbish after a while. He's better than nothing, but really only by a bit, I gotta say.
That's true. I do remember against enemies in chapter 4 or so, he was doing literally 1 damage at bad hit rates too.
Yeah, and he was missing, exactly. And yeah. That was with the Roy A support too.
Oh wait, what?
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If Volt had the fire affinity, he'd be so much better, right? Because then at least you want to support him with the Cavs and with Roy, because he has supports with all those pretty fast ones too. But he has Ice, which has no offensive bonus. There's no crit and no attack right like fire does, so it's kind of unfortunate. But you can have this
Ice
one.
is one of the full defensive ones. Let's go. Another kill for Lyn.
Easy. Roy will also be in there. Oh, he can heal with Ellen, and then Ellen doesn't die in 1 hit to this soldier, I think.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, cool. Because we do have Ellen for that kind of stuff. That's pretty nice. Having a healer, pretty cool, pretty chill. I like Ellen for early game utility, but I've never been able to commit to her long term. There's always someone I find more interesting to use, whether it's the heals on a horse, or heals on wheels, or it's just Saul with his higher staff rank and higher magic later on. But I think Ellen is reasonably useful for the chapters you have, or you have no one else. And then if you wanted to rate her for the chapter she's around when the others are too, you probably come up with a decent, a average grading, a nice 6, which for students I used to be, damn, I'm old. That's a passing grade, but I've never been super enthusiastic about her. I think her magic is just awful with the 1 base. The other stats look quite impressive, but honestly the most important part is just saving vulnerary uses, saving player phase actions, and later on maybe some warping, some restoring, some hammering. I think she's okay, but I've never been able to get the full Ellen experience in an entire playthrough. What about you?
Yeah, she's definitely the weakest of the 3 staff users that you'll get early on in the game. The 1 base magic is somewhat impactful, although for the most part you're using heals or mends, which we'll be fine. Even with 1 base magic, you'll still heal some HP. The biggest problem really is her D-base stabs.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for those of you who've not played FE6 before, you can level up the staff rank, and each use gives you 1 XP, and you need 50 to level up.
Yeah, you need like 1 weapon XP, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 weapon XP.
Yeah.
So you need to cast 50 stabs to level up to C, or to B, or to A. She does get plus 50 on promotion.
Yeah,
but it takes a long time.
Right? So she goes up to C at that point.
Exactly, yeah. She goes up to C. Woo. She gets Restore, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
Restore
good for her.
Recover.
And Recover, yeah. So there are a lot of things that you need to do to really make her a serviceable mid and late game unit, but she's here in the early game.
Yeah.
And can help us out now.
Exactly. Just now, just gonna help out Roy. One more thing to add, I think, you said it gives 1 weapon XP. Another problem with GBA staffs that I find for leveling healers is they also only give 11 EXP, period. So they just level up very slowly, so it takes a while to grow out of those bases, even if she had good growth. I mean, we could talk about Merlinus, but like, he's a driving convoy that plays on casual mode and comes back, but he can't fight. He just doesn't really level up or anything. He's just an invincible convoy, and that's pretty cool, but usually not very worth deploying. But you can do some Q-Trick with him. There's not too much to say on him, though, unless there's anything you want to say about him.
Oh, best unit in the game, honest to God. He doesn't die.
That's true. Or rather, he dies and comes back.
Okay, well, yeah.
Although if he was like legit invincible, that'd be pretty cool too. You could use him as a wall for like eternity. But yeah, he just draws a lot of fire basically. So next question is, we have like 5 enemies to kill. Do you have 5 combat units? Oh, there we go. We got some more. Hey, what's up? It's a Deke band. How's it going?
Should be
band?
The Ilian Mercenary Squad.
Oh yeah, they are Ilian because they got 1 Pegasus Knight with them. That makes sense. All right. Do you want to prefer to talk about any of these first? I can sentence.
Probably Deke and Shanna.
All right, I knew it. I knew it.
The most noteworthy. They're the most noteworthy by a lot.
They are, in a way. I mean, I like the fighters personally, but I'll get into that when we get to the fighters. All right. So what about Deke? Pretty good bases. I went through a weird phasing with Deke. Like at first, I really liked him when I first started playing the game, and then I started kind of being like, maybe he's not so great after all. And now I'm like, actually, in the context of FE6, this is still a really good unit overall. Maybe not as good as I thought he was at first, but definitely better than I gave him credit for a long time. His bases are really good. His growths are good enough for him to hold up throughout the entire game. Like, combine his bases with a couple levels of growth and his promotion, and he honestly holds up against most of the enemies in FE6. Doesn't always one-round everything, but his start is better than almost everyone else, with enough speed to double most of the enemies that you face at first, and then even once faster enemies appear, he at least doesn't get doubled, and maybe double some of the slower ones. It's pretty fine. 9 strength, I think, is equal to Marcus, which is pretty good. He has access to both Iron Blade and Iron Sword. The game very nicely gave us both of these options to show, like, hey, you can use Deke's higher constitution to your advantage if you want to, but it'll cost you a little bit in accuracy and some other areas. But generally, Deke is pretty good use of blades when he can afford to lose the accuracy, and if not, he's using Iron Sword instead, and he holds up pretty well. Gets access after promotion to Hero, which gives him access to 1-2 range, which is not as good in this game as it is in FE7 and FE8, because the hand axe itself is just less accurate, and usually you're better off with having good 1 range than having pretty mediocre 2 range. You saw with Marcus earlier, there was like a big trade-off between being accurate and actually being able to counter enemies, but the fact that he has that option is nice for him. So I think Deke overall is just a really solid unit, and I plan to use him in the early game. If he gets really good, I'll keep using him. If he doesn't get very good, I'm happy to drop him for someone else. But he's a good user of a Hero Crest beyond another Hero Crest user that we'll get later on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And for people who have played FE6 before, you knew on your first playthrough, this was your man, right? Like, he's just super strong in the early game. I must have been misled about his growths, because I could have swore he falls off a bit somewhere in the mid and late game. It's very rare I give him a Hero Crest these days. But perhaps I'm the one who's been misled, and he's actually much stronger than I thought he was.
He does only have a 30% speed growth, which is a bit misleading, because people often think they associate a 30% growth with bad speed, but Deke's base is so good that he could have like 1 less base speed and 40% growth, and a lot of people would think he's good, but he would actually be a bit slower for a majority of the early game. I think his speed is deceptively good. It's kind of on that, like, later on I think it's like Allen level speed, where it's just like, maybe not good enough, maybe it is good enough. But for the early game, he definitely suffices. Like, I think he doubles a lot of the X fighters in this portion. Well, maybe not these. They actually want more. Yeah, they actually need 1 more, 2 more points to double these. He's like the same speed as Lyn, actually, I think. I think Lyn has like 10 or 9. Yeah, he's actually 1 point faster than Lyn right now. So, but he doubles the soldiers. That's, I think, where his good first impression comes from. Is his ability to just dominate this fort. I think especially on normal mode, because then they'll be slow enough to get doubled by Deke and just get destroyed. I think the gap between normal mode and hard mode is definitely very visible when you're using Deke. But nonetheless, he still stands out among the other units, so I'm not going to blame him for that. Alright, so what about Shanna? I made a very long Pitfalls video on Shanna long ago, highlighting her strengths and the parts where she was underrated. So if you want a very elaborate analysis on that, I recommend watching it. But in short, the idea with Shanna is early game Pegasus Knights never have a great start. They usually have several stats on the low end of the spectrum. They got HP, strength, defense, all kind of problematic. All they really get generally is speed and some luck, and Shanna's luck isn't even that good. But fortunately, being a flyer offers so many options for Shanna that she can kind of circumvent those weaknesses. And honestly, some of these weaknesses aren't even as weaknesses as you might think. It might not even be as sus as you think. Like 6 base defense actually is pretty good enough to survive a lot of things you might not think she would. And this makes it able to take kills on enemy phase sometimes, or have just enough durability to survive, like a precarious part. And being able to fly around, pick off enemies from like difficult terrain, or being able to rescue drop people over mountains and other heavy terrain that you're trying to get over, like walls. Also, being able to promote with a Legion Whip around Chapter 8 gives her access to swords, which gives her access to a huge avoid bonus against axe users, which start to be very common at that point in the game, which is also a very good selling point for her. I might try to use Shanna throughout this entire game. I'm not sure how many more mouths I can afford to feed with the XP in this game, but the long-term story with Shanna is generally that she does rely on kill lances to get one-on kills, but that just kind of puts her on equal footing with a lot of the rest of the cast. So that means her low strength generally isn't that big of a problem. But Shanna is not very easy to use. It does take some checking ranges, making sure she's not in range of any archers. So not the easiest unit to use, but with proper planning, one of the most rewarding ones for sure.
Exactly. Just don't be silly with her and put her in range of somebody, and you should be fine. I will say too, even though she tends to have low strength and very high speed, and I mean very high speed, I think she has the highest speed growth in the game, barring, you know, silly units like Fa and Karel. If she has a great excess of speed over her enemies, what that means is you can just give her heavier weapons and you can sort of redeem that speed for extra attack if you need to. You only need to be 4 points over your enemy in order to double. So if you're 9 points over, that's 5 points of speed you can afford to use with, say, a Steel Lance or a Gant Lance. Or a Killer Lance in the case, as you mentioned earlier, Mecca.
Yeah, for sure.
That's 5 points of speed you can afford to lose for more attacks. So having high speed just generally gives you the flexibility to choose your weapons better. And that's definitely one of Shanna's strengths. The swords are really good too. I think we said enough about this unit. We'll have to see. Unfortunately, on this map, we'll have to see her on the struggle bus for a short while, but...
Yeah, next chapter is a lot better for training her, for sure. Yeah, the reason she has to make these trade-offs is because she has low constitution, right? So she gets weighed down by almost everything, including Iron Lances. Like, she loses, I think, 4 speed from an Iron Lance, but that still puts her at 8 speed, which is still better than a lot of the units that we have right now. But it does kind of hamper her speed advantage over other units a little bit, but not enough to make her, like, bad or anything. And then we have 2 fighters that I don't think many people really like, but that actually... I'm kind of growing towards wanting to use them because they just spice up a playthrough a little bit. You got Lot and you got Wade. They're not exactly the same, but I kind of want to discuss them in one breath because they have a lot of the same pros and cons. Generally with fighters, you usually have high HP, high strength, and middling to bad speed, depending on which fighter we're talking about. There are some exceptions to the rule, but generally this is how it goes. Kind of low defense as well, so their HP tends to go down kind of fast. Lot is kind of supposed to be a middle-of-the-road unit, where I think his growths are supposed to be quite balanced. You can even see his strength and speed are equal at base at 7. And he also has a pretty good defense growth. I believe it's like 40 or 50%, which is quite high. But it takes him a long time to grow out of these bases. They're not spectacular enough to really stand out, and it takes a while for his growth to show. And I think he usually doesn't really keep up with enemy speed very well. I think without speed wings, Lot can generally not be expected to double, and he's the faster of the 2 fighters. So they have some speed issues. But they do both get really high attack ratings between, for example, their supports. They have a fire and anima affinity, just like the Christmas Cavs, so they can get +3 attack from that. They also support Deke if you're into that, for another +1 from a B support if they want that. Axes have really high might innately, and of course they just have really high innate strength. So they can sometimes get one-shots to compensate for not doubling, or maybe with a killer axe they can get crits, but they're also always a little bit dicey. And then to add to that, of course, they only use axes before promotion, and then after promotion you only get E-rank bows, so sometimes their accuracy can be shaky, especially against enemies on terrain or just particularly fast ones. You also don't really have a good Sword Reaver, for example, to take advantage of enemies having swords, because the Sword Reaver in this game isn't very good. It's kind of inaccurate. So not as good as, like, not as easy to use as some of the later fighters in the series, but not completely trash either. Like, I think there's worse units in this game, but not great. And a lot is like the balanced one. Wade kind of takes it all out, and he takes the strength of a fighter, puts him up to 11, but then he also has worse speed for it and worse defense, I believe, as well, because his growth is worse. So more strength, more HP, less speed, less defense, so even more extreme in that regard, and usually for that he's worse off because he's actually slow enough to get doubled. But it does make him more entertaining to use sometimes when it does work out.
How's Wade do against this fighter right here, or this soldier right here?
This soldier?
Yeah.
Well, he won rounds.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That's because he's a soldier. I mean, I was actually thinking of putting like the fighters here instead of Deke for fun. It would be kind of funny, but they also like get overwhelmed more quickly. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. Maybe it's better to just have Deke go ham for a little bit. You could also weaken them for more, but like we have so many enemies to go through, I think it's better to just kind of take the initial wave with Deke, and then maybe the stragglers we can kill with the other guys, and we can go from there. Was there anything left to say on the fighters, do you think?
Not much. Wade does have the interesting utility that I pointed out. He one-rounds the fighters, and that's mapping the next.
Oh, I see. The fighters?
Yeah, not the fighters, the soldiers.
Oh, okay.
My bad,
wait, hold up. Hold up. Yeah. Oh yeah, we do have Chad. You're absolutely right. We do have Chad. We finally have a unit with less strength than Lyn. Let's go. Wait, actually, I mean, Lyn probably is like ties Roy at this point, but Chad has 3 base strength, but that's okay because he's a thief. He just steals stuff, right? So he doesn't really need stats to do anything substantial. He just needs to steal. You don't even need more speed than the enemy in this game in order to be able to steal stuff. So the 10 speed you can just kind of ignore when it comes to stealing. For combat, it's kind of nice that he's fast. He also has really good growths. Unfortunately, thieves do not promote in this game. There's no ocean seals or anything like that. He can't use a hero crest or an earth seal or anything like that. Earth seal doesn't even exist in this game. So Chad caps at level 20, which makes him pretty bad for a long-term combat unit, even if you wanted him to make one. But honestly, I don't think it's worth the trouble anyway, even if he could promote, because his bases are so annoying to get through. Hard mode has some enemies that can just one-shot him with 16 HP and 2 defense. So it's really just dodgy, and that's about it. And then only being able to use swords. Like, I know we said an FE6 being locked to swords isn't too bad, because at least the accuracy actually comes in handy in this game. And whereas lances and axes, they can have accuracy problems sometimes. But sometimes you wish you had this little more might, like, I really wish. But at least his growths are really good. So if you wanted to make something out of it, you could sort of do it. But I've never been really happy about him as a combat unit. What about you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned his growths, and if you could promote, he has the highest growths of anyone outside of Fa and Karel.
Yep.
So it's kind of funny you say that. And we were also talking about, you know, being locked to swords isn't too bad, because at least you have high accuracy. Well, people not used to older FE games might notice something. This was the days before thieves had skill. They decided that just wasn't a stat that was going to go on thieves. I think Comb as well has low skill in FE8. Who was the first skill who were really high thief? The first thief had really high skill. It was probably Jafar or Volk.
Probably.
I believe.
Yeah, they're supposed to be assassins anyway, not thieves. I will say, I did forget to mention this, but there is a lot of treasure in this game that they want to steal, because enemies don't have droppable weapons in this game, or droppable items, so there's a lot of treasure chests and stealable items in this game, so at least Chad is good for that. So he's actually really good for that. So we will be using Chad quite a lot until we get more thieves. Yo, what up, Lou? It's our favorite mage, joining later in Chapter 3, because I did a different strategy than I normally do, but yeah, it's the Lou boy. Good.
It's Lou.
Yeah, it's Lou. It's Lou. I like using Lou as a unit, but over the years I've become a lot more aware of his shortcomings, but at base, like at the basics of it, he's pretty good at accurate chip, especially in the early game. Enemy res is pretty low in this game, as it is in most games, so despite the fact that he has only 4 magic, and despite the fact fire only has like 4 or 5 might, he's still able to do decent damage overall, and it's pretty... I would say it's pretty easy overall to build him up to a point where he can promote. And when he promotes, I think he gets 4 or 5 magic, which is a pretty insane amount. And because his speed is also pretty good, he will usually double. And I don't remember if he won rounds consistently in hard mode, but he does enough damage to where he's a viable unit offensively. Where I think his shortcoming is just durability. He only has 16 HP, 3 defense. It's only 2 better. It's only 1 point better than what Chad has in total. So that says a lot about how much hit he can take. There are enemies that can one-shot him in the upcoming chapters. Especially in Chapter 5, enemy attack is like sky high and needs to get to one-shot. I think even by some hand axes, he can take some really heavy damage. So he's definitely someone you have to be careful with. But being ranged really helps with that. He can do chip damage without getting countered, and set of kills for others, which is honestly all you can ask a mage to do in this game. So overall, I'd say Lugh is decent, but sometimes a little hard to use. But overall, nice. What do you think?
I think a lot about him too. Go over and check his inventory.
Oops. Here you go.
There you go, and click on the fire tome.
Oh, yeah.
For people complaining about FE6 accuracy, 95 hit. They didn't get this one. So the thing is with Lugh is that for this chapter and the next 2, he's force deployed. And he's the only person who can use this fire tome, and the fire tome is good. So already we're talking about 2 chapters, maybe this one too if you used him at all, where he has like exclusive utility. Is actually really good and helps out a lot. That's more than a lot of characters, frankly, in Fire Emblem in general can say. So that alone is pretty good. Use him during those 2 chapters. Figure out if he's any good. If he's getting great level ups, perfect. Keep using him. If not, don't worry about it. You have a lot of other really good characters. That's kind of the rhythm of FE6 in general. Use them when they're good, and then the moment that they look like they're falling off, that's fine. Bench them. You'll have other units as well. But you know, if you're really falling in love with them and they're getting great level ups, it's awesome to keep using them. I really like Lugh. I think he's a good unit.
All right, sounds good. Yep. So
our new unit.
Yeah, I know, right? It's one of the 2 we get this chapter, I think, and not the better one, but nonetheless a useful one. Troubadours. I did a archetype tier list on them a while ago, and I commented they're like almost always useful for something, almost every turn. Because if you're on a horse and you have staves, what you can do every turn is either heal somebody or do a useful rescue drop. You almost never are out of things to do, and that makes Clarine like good regardless of stats. It's the same reason why I think Cecilia is a very good unit, but Cecilia can also attack. Clarine cannot, so you have to protect her from everything, not just because she cannot attack, but also because she only has 15 HP, 2 defense, and the growths don't make her much better, and it's kind of going to stay that way for a while. The one way to make Clarine viable for combat is to give her supports with Rutger and Deke, which is not as fast as the Alan supports, for example. But if you do it, you do get a very dodgy, crit-heavy Clarine build. It's kind of fun to do. I did it in my first playthrough. I'd recommend everyone try it once, but I also recommend trying her out without the supports and seeing how useful she is just without combat, because she really is excellent. The one big weakness she has, in my opinion, is that she has a base D-rank of staves, and like we went over with Ellen, that is a hole to climb out of if you want to be able to use like warp or even rescue or something like that. So that takes a while to get good at, but even with just D staves and later C staves, she's a very useful support character that I would recommend everyone using their playthroughs until they don't feel like it anymore. Like a very useful character, if not the most impressive one stat-wise. That's my take on her.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, what you said a moment ago is totally true. Pretty much of all FE6 units, if not all FE units, use them for a bit, and if you like them, keep using them. If you don't like them, then put them away. There's really Clarine for the next 2 maps is force deployed, so you might as well use her while you can.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think Clarine is one of those units that, like, even if she gets bad level ups, you would still use her for those maps and beyond, because the utility she provides is useful regardless of the statistics that she reaches. But if she gets really good level ups, then you can still keep using her and maybe make her like a combat unit or something like it, if you wanted to.
Speaking of the hard mode bonuses, we're about to recruit a unit.
I know, right? Let's go grab him. Let's go grab the man himself, Rutger boy. Oh, it's you. Very disappointing sound for recruiting such an overpowered unit. Let's put you out of the way for now, Ro. And check out the Rutger. This man right here, this dude. What a monster. What a champ. What an absolute PogChamp of a unit. Look at him. I think this might be one of the best units, one of the best foot units, I should say, in all of Fire Emblem. Like, I made that whole top 15 list of best units in like the entire series. I don't believe Rutger was on it. I think he was there for consideration, but I didn't end up putting on him there because there were, I think, better units overall. But in the context of FE6, Rutger is so good. He's the reason that I wanted to do the Lyn experiment, partially because Rutger has a lot of traits of units that are kind of considered in other games, like Swordmasters in general. But in this game, they all work out to perfection. You have high speed benchmarks you need to hit that Rutger managed to get pretty much easily, flawlessly. Accuracy, usually not a problem in other games, but Rutger has accuracy in a game where most people don't have much accuracy. And then he also is in a game where Swordmasters get a 30% crit bonus, and he gets hard bonuses to make him better in hard mode compared to normal mode, which is also kind of a plus in and of itself. And just, the man just doesn't stop hitting, critting, and killing enemies. I think this is the best combat unit in the game over the course of the whole thing, taking ability into account. He's one of my favorite units to use, and I plan to use him a lot. Maybe Lyn will eclipse him in some utilities, like maybe against Cavs, I'd rather use her. But right now, my Lyn is not doubling, so Rutger will probably still be doing more damage to Lyn on the whole, considering the whole spectrum of enemies. This is super fun unit to use, absolute pleasure. I love this guy.
Yeah, Rutger has like 5 speed over Lyn right now.
He doubles Lyn.
Kind of good. He doubles Lyn, yes. Actually, how much is the killing edge weigh?
9, maybe? I'm gonna check real quick. 7. It actually doesn't get weighed down at all. Strong unit.
He doubles Lyn.
Yeah, I guess he's
probably
not...
1 rounds by a lot.
Yeah, probably, yeah. I would not be surprised if there was a weapon that let him Oko Lyn, honestly. If he needs like 22 attacks, so like a Steel Blade maybe gets him there, like a Silver Sword, perhaps? Not sure.
That's right.
Yeah, I guess he's another one of those units that can also trade his attack speed for strength if he needs to. Like he can use an Iron Blade and still double like enemy fighters sometimes. Stuff like that is very useful as well.
Is it not the case, maybe this Rutger rolled low on speed, but is it not the case that Rutger with an Iron Blade is faster than Deke with an Iron Blade?
That might be the case. I know my Deke right now is 10 or 11, but doesn't get weighed down. So if Rutger does like 11 speed from an Iron Blade, he would, I think, let me just check that before I just make up stuff. Weighs 12, so Deke right now doesn't get weighed down, he has 11. This guy gets weighed down to 10, so technically right now Deke is faster, but Rutger's speed growth is much higher, so that won't be the case for much longer.
That's true. So let me see how we rolled, because... So Rutger is the first enemy in the game who receives hard mode bonuses. And it's a select set of units, usually ones that you recruit from the enemy team. And what that does mean is that his base stats are not fixed, they are a bit variable. So I haven't completely done the math on how exactly lucky this Rutger is. But I'm sure whenever we had the video uploaded in the screenshot, I can run the numbers, or one of the mathematicians in the chat can tell us how lucky or unlucky we got.
Yeah. I want to say you could get 10 strength and maybe 16 speed, but I'm not sure about that. I guess we're just gonna have to see. But regardless of how you roll, I think Rutger is fantastic all around. Like, you don't have to reset for a good Rutger, because there's no such thing as a bad Rutger. So we have an archer and a healer. Do you have any preference? So we should talk about first.
Let's talk about Saul. He's probably the better unit. So
all right, this Saul it is. So I enjoy Saul. I haven't finished FE6 often enough to really use him full, like long term, but I know he's really good because of the C rank stats at base and just pretty tolerable stats overall. Obviously, I'm trying to use Ellen because I haven't really used her before, and she seems interesting. But I would not blame anyone for using Saul. And if you're playing a little bit faster than I am, then Saul will probably have a higher stat rank than Ellen would, or even Clarine at this point in the game. But stat utility in FE6 is really big, besides the healing that we've already been doing for so many maps. You got Restore, you got Warp, you got Rescue, Fortify is even in the game, I believe. You got Physicking, of course, and you get a couple Physic stats, Barrier. All these utility is best done by someone who has the stat rank to use it, and then Saul has the easiest stat rank to grind up in the whole game. In fact, until you get Nime and Yoder, you're probably not going to have anyone with a higher stat rank than Saul. So, superb utility unit. The biggest danger for him is, of course, durability. Defense is kind of low. HP is also kind of low for this point in the game. And he has 2 luck, so he can always get crit. But other than that, this unit has no real drawbacks, as long as you use him like you would use a healer. Just keep him around, defend everyone, and you're chill. Anything to add?
The 2 luck is always hilarious, because like, his character is not like, you know, he's this womanizer of a priest, right? So, you know, I can always imagine the 2 luck is like he just can never catch a break. Oh no. He's like trying to flirt with the ladies, like, no.
Never lucky.
We're not having any of it. Never lucky, exactly. So, yeah, very fast. Like, you pretty much said it all. He has high staff rank and he has high base level. So he's really easy to get to warp range. He's really easy to get to promotion. Just overall, probably the best of the staff locked units that you get here in this early game.
Right. Fair enough. I'll use him when I need him this chapter. If not, I'll just trade his Mentis to Ellen and use her instead. Then we have Dorothy, who I don't think is great, but I know she has some fans, so I'm not going to be too harsh on her. I looked at Dorothy's official art a while ago because I was getting it for the official tier list, wrapping up FE6 there, and Dorothy's art's actually really cool, so I really tried to give her another honest look when thinking about how to review her, but I just don't get what they were thinking when they made Dorothy. I guess my best guess is they just wanted her to replace Walt if you grew weary of Walt or you got him killed somehow and they wanted to just have another archer at your disposal. But I just don't get why. Like, I understand using archers, especially in this game where player phase is more important than enemy phase, and range attackers are actually useful to evade enemy counterattacks, and there's a lot of enemy wyverns to shoot down, but I just don't get why they gave archers such low stats. Like, her stats are barely better than Wolt's in Chapter 1. His stats, I mean, we call them slightly better than nothing a couple times now. But hers are like not even that much better. The main thing I like about her is having fire affinity and a support potential with Sol. That's the best thing I can say about her. And her growths are like alright. She's like, I think around 40 to 50 on both strength and speed. So it's alright for a character that joins in like 4 chapters ago. But if you compare it to someone like Alan, who we've been using full time, he's way higher level than her. So why not just make her that kind of level, and she'd be much, much better off. But unfortunate. I want to like her, but I don't think she's very good.
Yeah, I fully admit she's really not an excellent unit by any stretch of the imagination. She has 7 con, which is funny because she can rescue Sol, not the other way around. Like that's a particularly noteworthy bit. Fire Emblem 6 does have a lot of units that are, frankly speaking, just weaker than your contemporaries. Dorothy is, I think, the first one of them. You could probably argue that like Latin Wade are in that category as well. But the thing is too is like Fire Emblem 6 has so many units that there are plenty of really strong units if you want to only use really strong units. Like you'll be able to deploy full teams of only strong units. If, however, you're the kind of guy who, you know, enjoys taking a less popular unit or enjoys taking a unit who appears weaker on the surface and, you know, training them up, these units exist for you as well. Some of them take a lot more work than others. Like, out of the bad units, Dorothy's like probably one. Dorothy's far from the worst unit of the game. Let me just put it that way. But I do like how the units in FE6 are very different. You'll probably find something you like. If you look at Dorothy and you're like, this is rubbish, I don't want to use it, you don't have to.
That's totally fair. I do think like if you want to use a bad unit, training Dorothy isn't the worst because she's in a fairly easy chapter, so it's easy to raise her up compared to someone like Kath who joins later, or someone like Sophia who joins in a very, you know, perilous chapter. But at the same time, oh hello Sue. At the same time, I want to use this chapter to train my units that are good because they need the help. So it's kind of, I still kind of don't want to, you know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So Zealot is someone who hasn't played the games before might call him a second copy of Marcus, or another copy of Marcus, which in a way he is. He's a little different, but in a way you just get a second Marcus. Pretty good base stats. The 13 speed is deceptively high. It's one of the highest in their team. It's faster than Lyn for one, and it enables him to double a couple things that Marcus would not with his base 11 speed. Ours hasn't gotten speed yet. And his bulk is pretty acceptable, especially because he has really good weapon ranks. C in swords means you can use Killing Edge or Armor Slayer. D in axes, it doesn't really do all that much, but it does give him the hammer and the halberd. And A lance is of course fantastic for using that silver lance. We got a new one last chapter that we can use. So he has all sorts of options available to make his stats work. And he has, for this point of the game, he has really good stats. As the game goes on, it will fall off just like Marcus. His growth rates are not very good, as you can see on the screen, hopefully. Mecha, please edit them in. And then he will probably not be deployed for the entire game, but the portion that he's there for, that you want to use him, he's going to be one of your best units. And that's the great thing about units like this. I think Raisins talks about it all the time. If you don't want to use him anymore, you can just drop him off, use someone else instead, and you'll just be better off all the way through. There's no investment required, so it's free utility, and that's really good. No promotion item required. Rescue dropping is really useful, and then combat holds up pretty well for like half of the game, I would say. I like this guy.
For sure. I love this guy. He's like my husband. He's my favorite character in the series, actually.
Wait, what?
No, I'm serious. He's my favorite in the series.
Damn.
Just super cool dude. Arrives midway through. Has some awesome stats. Sure, they may fall off later. I'm pretty sure I've only seen this man level HP in all my lives. I've used him every single run through. Every level up he gets is just HP, and we move on. And that's all we get. But I don't know. I still love him. I'm a big fan of pretty much the first pre-promote you get in any game, especially if it's this like heavy-hitting cav. Like I love some Gunters, I love some Dusels. Jarrett's kind of similar, or Zealot rather is kind of similar, because he just has his high strength, his high skill, his high defense, and like you said, the high speed as well.
Fair.
I really like this unit. By the way, if anybody gets confused because the game says Jarrett, there was an old translation that said Zealot.
Oh yeah.
And then a middling one just decided to translate it to Jarrett. I think that's what we're using right now. And then FE Heroes officially, I think, translated as Zealot, Z-E-L-O-T, right?
I don't know Heroes, but you're probably right.
Yes, so
Oh yeah,
we're pretty much gonna call him Zealot.
yeah. I like that name.
It's such a cool name.
I remember I was playing. I was commentating Donon's run on FE6, and he was using the Japanese, not the translation patch. He was playing in Japanese, but I think he wanted to use Jarrett as the name because it was semi-officially localized. But I forgot, and I just called him Zealot once, and like because Donan is like a really stickler for consistency, you just had to call him Zealot all game long, or like all playthrough long, even though you really didn't want to. All right, trivia aside, that's the Zealot. And you have to check one of his friends. He's holding Roy right now, so his stats look a little weak, but it should have like 6 speed, 6 skill, or something along those lines. Let me just. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, now we can look Treck in full glory.
There we go.
So another replacement kind of unit. We've had Alan and Lance early game, and what if they die? You get new Cavs here, and they're not as good as they would have been if you trained up the originals, but if you don't have them anymore, you'll be grateful to have a replacement. That's kind of the philosophy of FE6 character design for the most part. Some would call it unbalanced, but I think it's fair and honestly kind of fun. If you've been playing this game like 5-6 times, you probably want to do something different anyway than use the same characters over again. Treck is, I think he's supposed to be kind of like Lowen, more of a tanky Cavalier. I don't think he succeeds entirely in this aspect. I don't think he's super tanky at base, but he can take a couple hits, dish him out. The Paladin class is just good overall, but Treck is like a somewhat okay character in a good class more than anything else. The main worry I have for Treck personally is that he only has an E rank in swords, so he can only use the iron sword. For now, that's all we've been needing for swords for the most part, but it takes him longer to get to weapons like steel sword, killing edge, armor slayer, and higher rank swords than that. So he's a longer path to go there, and then his lance rank doesn't really compensate. It's only D as well. So also getting into like killer lance rank, for example, is going to take a little bit. He'll probably get there, but he has some more weapon rank building to do in other characters, which I don't really like. Other than that, I think he's okay. But he's not going to get there on stats alone. He really relies on the Cavalier class to show himself off. But nonetheless, another take dropper is pretty useful. I don't really have any long-term experience with Treck. Do you?
I'm using in the low tiers, right?
Oh,
He's
right.
my main carry right
there we
now,
go, expert right here.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is because I really slowed down on a couple of maps and like fed Treck every kill, and now he's like, he has like an 8 support with Noah, who actually just died recently, but he's getting an 8 support with Gonzalez. Just doing even better. But for sure, he's a much weaker combat unit. To be honest, he's probably the weakest Cavalier in the game. Noah, whom we're about to get, is coming right up behind, but like you said, he's another person you can use rescue utility, take drop utility. His combat's kind of poo, but so be it. One thing about him, either an interesting strength or an interesting weakness, is that he starts at level 4, which means he is gaining XP very quickly, but it also means he's rather far away from a promotion item if you wanted to use one early. We don't get a Night Crest this map, but we get one very soon.
Yeah, next map is the first one. But lots of competition for it, so I don't know if he would ever be able to give it to him even by that time, because he would need 6 levels. But if he gains XP that quickly, maybe he does. I don't know, like I said, no long-term experience. So here we have Noah. The game kind of presents Noah and Treck as like a duo, but I think Noah is very different in a lot of ways. Higher base level at 7 compared to 4, which he's close to promotion. And unlike Treck, Noah I think is a pretty reasonable early promotion candidate. You do only get 1 quick Night Crest, but if you're not using Alan and Lance, then I think he's actually the best Night Crest user in the game. Besides, like, you could argue Barth could, in some very niche context, be the one, but generally I think Noah is a pretty good Night Crest candidate because he can kind of work as like a third Paladin, mostly because he has a sword rank of C. So at base, he can use like Killing Edge and Armor Slayer, both very good weapons that you rely heavily on when you're backed into a corner in FE6, but he doesn't pay for it with his lance rank. It's the same D lances as Treck. It's not like Cain and Abel where one has a good sword rank and one has a good lance rank. No, he just has equal or better ranks all around, which makes him much more useful. And his bases are, I mean, not that much better than Treck's, but they're slightly better. I think his speed is 1 higher. He has like 2 more HP or something. Kind of modest difference. But I think he mostly just relies on the swords for his better utility. I don't have any long-term experience with Noah beyond that. That's pretty much all I know about him, and it might just be all there is to say about him. I don't know. I don't think he's super great for long-term prospects. I just appreciate sea swords and extra rescue dropping utility. But that's really all I've ever used Noah for in my life.
Did you say that's all you know about him?
Bro, we can't do this. No, we can't do this. I can't do this. I can't take this. No.
Yeah, I don't know much about him either, to be honest with you.
I mean, fast support with Treck, right? That's really what you used him for.
well, fast, quote unquote. But
Oh, it's not fast, rip.
I actually don't know what it was, but I think I was only doing Treck Noah at the times when I was grinding up. You are right, the Sea Swords is pretty much the most impactful part of it. The ability to use Killing Edge in particular in this map, and Armor Slayer in particular in this map, is really nice. After that, he becomes, pretty much Treck 2. Generic Cav 2.
Dude with 8.
He's still a cool dude, though. He recruits Fear, you know?
Oh yeah, that's why we want to keep him alive. Like, that's one of the things about this chapter. I feel like we should probably talk about this guy. That's the reason I didn't feel a thief, which is good old Astor. One of the best thieves in the series, I think, just based off of stats. Like, if you just look at his bases, you can see why. He has a high base level and then 15 base speed. So they really want to, I guess the closest thing to a thief pre-promotes in a game where thieves do not promote. He just comes combat ready. It's kind of a rarity in FE6 sometimes to have a thief that just does that. So he can fight pretty well. He doubles almost everything. He can trade some of his speed for strength if you want him to, through like an iron blade or a steel sword. But he also has pretty high con, so he doesn't even lose that much speed to begin with. And beyond that, thief utility in this game is very good. It's not a whole lot to mention about it. It's just you can steal stuff, you can open chests, and there are a lot of them in this game. And like I said before, there are undroppable items in this game. So most of the treasure you get, most of the valuables come from either recruited units or chests or stealables. And Astor can get 2 out of 3, so in that way he's valuable on his own. So great utility and pretty good combat until you're gonna start promoting and he doesn't hold up as well anymore. But pretty good overall. I like this guy. You too?
For sure, and he's definitely the strongest thief in the game stats wise. To do all the stealing things on the thief utility, in order to steal, in order to open up a chest or open up a door, you don't need stats. But I do think it's noteworthy that Astor has the 25 HP and the 7 defense, because it allows him to get to the door or to the chest or to the stealable item a little bit easier. After a while, I think usually it's after chapter 12x, his defensive stats become no longer adequate to just allow him to survive any old thing. But in the interim, he should be fine. I quite like Astor. Also, don't forget, you can deploy him on Fog of War maps to increase your vision range if you want to.
That's true.
So a lot of great things that thieves can do.
And then the Austin gang is here. We have Armor Slayer, Barth, and Wendy. One of my favorites from my last FE6 Iron Man run, which was the last time I played this game, I'm pretty sure. Or at least played it completely. So, any preferences on what we do first?
Let's talk about the effective weaponry.
Alright, effective weaponry it is. So, this is the Armor Slayer. It has 8 might, 85 hit, and 11 weight. It's really good against Armor Knights, as we're going to demonstrate in this enemy phase, hopefully. Very high accuracy, very strong weapon. It's being carried by Uujay, who, believe it or not, for the longest time people debated on whether he's better than Deke or not because his speed growth is a bit higher. But unfortunately, his bases are quite a bit lower and his growths are not notoriously better enough to where I think he really competes with Deke in a realistic setting. But there was once a time when there was a contest. His class is like alright. Like we said before, being a sword locked unit in this game isn't all that bad. But when it's combined with kind of lackluster stats in chapter 8, like 7 strength, 9 speed, is not that great. He doesn't double much reliably besides like Steel Axe fighters, so he does take some work to get going. He's not as fragile as some of the other units that we get in this chapter, like Lilina and Wendy, but he can get one shot by some very strong enemies, and then usually gets 2 shot by everything else. Always takes a counterattack because there's no ranged weaponry for him besides like the 1 light brand you get. So I still think he doesn't have enough options and enough statistics to really hold up very well. But he's not untrainable. Like, there is a bunch of axe-using enemies coming up that you could train him against if you want to. But I would not recommend it to a new player who's not familiar with the game to just use this guy on their first hard mode playthrough, I guess, is what I'd say. If you're playing normal mode, though, he probably holds up a lot better. But I don't have a super high opinion on him.
Yeah, no, normal mode, he's fine. I'm kind of the same. He's definitely in the lower half of units, to be sure. There are worse units than him. Usually when I'm looking at a unit's bases to see if they're any good, I'm looking to see if they have anything exceptionally high, and Uujay really doesn't. His speed stat and his skill stat are both, like, kinda up there, but 10 is not exactly that good for this part of the game. It's also a very fun fact, because of his con, he cannot one-round boars at base, because he doesn't double them with the Armor Slayer. So...
Such a PvP thing to say. One more thing, he competes for a promotion item with a lot of other units, Hero Crest units. I don't think we talked about it very much, but Rutger, Deke, and all the fighters use all the same promotion item, the Hero Crest. There's only 2 of them that you get reasonably early. And we're already in trouble with that because we're using Wade, Rutger, and Deke, and then this guy on top, as well as someone like Fear or any of the others in this game. Like
right, maybe even Gonzalez.
There's so much competition, yeah. So it's kind of hard to find a promo spot for him. But if you like him, you can definitely use him. Then we have two Armor Knights who have it even worse when it comes to promotion items, because there's only one Knight Crest that's reasonably early. And I mean, I got 2 Cavaliers already, and I've got 2 more that I've benched or I'm using as a temp. So then imagine fitting these guys in your whole roster. No Boars though, so at least that's not there for competition. This is the better one between the two, but also the less funny one. This guy's name is Barth, but I think he used to be called like Barth E, like an E at the end, or this is like another name for him. I like to call him Lego Head because his head is like almost a perfect square. If you like trim away the hair, maybe some of the, color. He is probably the most quintessential Armor Knight in the whole series, in that he's really just HP, strength, and defense, and everything else is absolutely horrendous. He gets doubled by a lot of enemies because of his low 5 base speed. He has low luck, so he can get crit by a lot of things, and his res is so bad that sometimes he gets one-rated by mages. So if you look at someone like FE7 Osman, for example, he's like a knight, but he's also like a ball of stats. He has like reasonably good speed and res to like not have any of those things happen to him, and Barth doesn't have any of those compensations. So even though his HP and defense are good, I find it hard to really tank with Barth, because it's just somehow it still ends up taking a bunch of damage, whether it's Steel Axe fighters, or mages, or armor slayers, or lance reavers. There's always someone that's still like picking on Barth somehow, despite the high defense. He does have a fantastic 16 con, which allows him to pick up anyone, but in return he also can't really be picked up by a whole lot of other units, so moving him around with his 4 move is not very easy. Currently considered one of the worst units in FE6, not the worst, but one of the worst ones. But funny if you like units that have standout stats, which I guess that was the first thing you noticed when you first evaluated him. It's like, man, this guy has a very high defense.
Oh, for sure. High defense, high strength. I love this unit. I practically never use him, but I love him. Just, it kind of embodies what I enjoy about FE6, in that Fire Emblem 6 has so many completely extreme units everywhere you go. Whereas I feel like in FE7 and FE8 in particular, the other GBA games, they really kind of toned it down and made everybody, you know, like kind of moderate, kind of more
close
balanced, to each other. Yeah, exactly. But in this one, it's like, what if we had an Armor Knight that was just like an Armor Knight among Armor Knights? Like this guy makes Oswin look like a Myrmidon, dude. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know, right? That's funny because like Armor Knight's supposed to be the polar opposite of a Myrmidon, basically.
Yeah. So I really love him. I practically never use him. I've promoted him once or twice, but I will say he actually tanks a lot of the sword-bearing enemies in this particular chapter, and even the lance-bearing enemies really well. There are a couple armor slayers being thrown around here or there, so you gotta watch out for those. But in this chapter in particular, he's a fine tanking unit.
I agree.
So we probably move on to the next bad one.
Yeah. Yay, Wendy. Was rechristened as Gwendolyn at some point. I think that doesn't fit in this patch, which is why it's still called Wendy here. And honestly, I always just call her Wendy because that's what she's been nicknamed as for ages. If you look at the base stats, you probably get a pretty good idea of why people either really hate Wendy or really love using her, because it really just depends on what type of a player, what kind of a person you are. I'm someone who can enjoy both training up units that start off really bad, but I'm also someone who really likes analyzing and comparing units. In those cases, she doesn't exactly end up on top. But if you look at these bases, they would not be good if she joined in Chapter 1. In fact, if there were like 5 chapters before Chapter 1 that you could train in, like a Shadow Dragon prologue or something, and you could use her there, you still wouldn't want to use her, because 4 base strength is horrendous. It's like worse than Volt, I'm pretty sure, if not tied with Volt. 3 base speed is like Boar's level, if not worse than that. I think you might start with 4. 8 defense is like decent for level 1 unit, but then paired with 19 HP, you're never going to tank anything. 3 base skill means you're never hitting the broadside of the barn. Our growths are like acceptable to the point where she can end up good if you put a lot of faith in her, but it doesn't help that she's only using lances. And people often say like axe locked, like they're sword locked or lance locked or axe locked, is hurting them. In this game, it's kind of an unfair standard because almost every unit is locked to something besides Cavaliers and Paladins. But in Wendy's case, it would really be nice if she could use like swords every once in a while, because she really has accuracy issues. I trained Wendy for an Iron Man once, and I was constantly looking at like hit rates in the 50s, 60s, 70s, sometimes even 40s. Enemies on terrain shields just never hit ever. It's such a pain to train her. You practically have to do things like boxing in an archer and hitting them over and over and over and over until they faint, just to get Wendy anywhere. But it can be very rewarding because it's super funny, and it's very disrespectful to the game to train a unit like that. Would recommend everyone do it at least once in their life just to get the experience, but don't expect anything great because God, it's painful.
Yeah, there's, objectively speaking, there's some debate as to whether or not Wendy is the worst unit in the game.
Yes.
Like, there are a couple other candidates later on. But this is a pretty decent candidate. That said, you know, just because a unit is, objectively speaking, weak doesn't mean that you can't have fun using them. I've definitely done the Windy training one before. You know, I've definitely torn my hair out at that. In case you want to get a little bit depressed, go ahead and look up her averages at level 20 Armor Knight. They don't really get much better than this. Like, but, you know, still a fun unit. Like I said, I appreciate that Wendy exists because there's probably a player out here who needed a unit like this in order to really fall in love with the game. And if that's what it took, then like, that's what you get.
Totally fair. I think she does have like some of the better speeds among the Armor Knights, but Boris also kind of has that. So even that niche she kind of just doesn't have. But hey, you can always, you know, if you want to see me train the Wendy up, like, look at my FE6 Iron Man. It's actually like really funny, if I may say so myself. With the power of anime and Lyn on our side, we have powerful units.
We have Thunder.
We have Thunder. We also have these stats, and we also have an empty support list that we could definitely make use of, and C and Anima to make use of Elfire right away. We could have just traded our Elfire. Okay, calm down.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I mean, probably.
Oh my goodness.
We had Elfire from a chest, right? We probably could have done it somehow. There was probably
C rank.
Even if we had to set it up from turn 1, the fact is there was a way to get our Elfire, and we could have done a better job. So I'm already failing at using Lilina, because I want to use Lilina, I think. I think that'll be fun, because I think I said it before. Roy, if we were to kill off Lance or like bench him, Roy has room for supports with Lilina, and he's the fastest support in the game. It activates in like 1 turn. Lilina can also support Lyn, and is one of the few units I would use long term to support Lyn. I guess Astor could be counted as long term, but Wendy and Barth not so much. And I think that would be a good combo. Lilina has light, Lyn has wind. That's basically the same affinity. You know, it gives full attack, full hit, and full crit as well. So that's pretty good for all of them. Not defensively, of course, but that was never their specialty to begin with. Like, Lilina, in a lot of ways, is similar to Lyn in that regard. And like, situationally, she can do a lot of damage. You just gotta be very careful with her, because her defenses are Garbo, 16 HP, 2 defensive base. It's not gonna get much better. I think her level 20 unpromoted averages is not even 30 HP. So she has a lot of problems staying alive if she gets attacked. Her speed is kind of low too. She's only got 4 base, and I think her growth is like 30 to 35%. So a lot more doubling issues than Lugh does for sure. But in exchange, she gets insanely funny high magic. Probably gets up to 30 if you level her up all the way. And that's why a lot of people enjoy using her in their first playthroughs and just the normal mode and stuff. She's definitely one of the worst, I'm not going to say worst, but worst units in hard mode because of that, because it's just so tough to keep her alive. She doesn't double anything. Whereas in normal mode, she can sometimes get by one with KOing. On hard mode, I think she has a very hard time to use her. But, you know, I just haven't used Lilina in ages. I don't think I've ever used her in a full playthrough of hard mode. And I want to use someone that can support Lyn to compensate for the fact that she has no support yet. And I think Lilina is like a perfectly good candidate for that. So I want to use her.
Out of all of her
stats are not
out
great.
of all of our Lyn candidates,
yeah,
she's probably the best, which is it's weird to say. Because we looked at Wendy and we looked at Barth and we're like, okay, well, like Wendy aside, we looked at Barth and we're like, okay, there's maybe something here, even if it's like just purely comedic value. When we look at Lilina, it's like the other kind of comedic value. Yeah, depending on who you ask, Lilina is like either one of the best or one of the worst units in the game. And I think it's pointing to what you mentioned earlier. Everyone gets her in like their first normal mode playthrough and gives her a bunch of levels and she's fine sometimes.
Yeah,
and that definitely like gives her a more favorable evaluation. Us, on the other hand, us lot, we were blundering trying to get her the Thunder Tome. I think she's in range of a Killer Lance now.
Yeah, we're small brain.
She's a requirement for the Gaiden. We're like 3 turns away from attacking with a Thunder Tome. Like, her speed growth is so low, it takes her 2 turns to attack, apparently. Like,
yeah.
She's having a lot of trouble getting over there in time. But all of this blundering shouldn't be taken into her evaluation.
No.
Just, you know.
We have to be fair and balanced here. Hey, what's up, Fear?
Oh, hey.
Why'd you just kill my friend?
Noah.
Okay, perhaps it's time that we talk about units that we recruit before we forget that too. Fear is Myrmidon just like Rutger, so just like Rutger, she promotes to the Swordmaster class, which means automatic plus 30 critical, which is absolutely insane if you've been seeing Rutger. Her stats in general are also just really good. Fear, I find she also looks a lot like Lyn. I wouldn't be surprised if Lyn's design was partially based on Fear's. There's not many female Myrmidons in GBA FE, and Lyn is one of the most like them. Fear's cool in a lot of ways. She gets hardware bonuses, so her strength is pretty good. Her speed is really good for her level, at least. Like, she's level 1 Myrmidon with these stats. That's pretty good alone. Obviously a bit under level, but very trainable if you want to. I think her biggest problems, besides the fact that, like, yeah, Rutger's better, which is not a major sin. That goes for half the cast. I think one of her biggest problems is the lack of hero crests overall in this game. Like I said before, when we were discussing Wade, Lot, Uujay, Deke, there's just a lot of people that want that hero crest, that Rutger crest, and we only get 2 in a reasonable span of time. One of them we already have used on Rutger, and one of them we're about to get in like the next couple chapters. So I don't think there's room on my team to use Fear, because I already have Wade and Deke to like argue about a second hero crest. I don't even know where I'm getting a third in time. So I think Fear's going to hit the bench, but she's not super great because of that.
We not only have a lot of hero crest candidates now, but we're also about to get 2 more, and one of them is actually a pretty good one too, in my opinion. So this is actually a really strong unit. I quite like Fear, just because, again, overlook the low level for a moment. These bases are actually pretty good. She's getting a lot of hard mode bonuses right now, and she's a Swordmaster class, so she just has really strong one-range combat. Swordmasters in particular have probably the best one-range combat in the game of any class. Barring perhaps someone like Percival and Milady, right? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, that's cheating, okay? Like, oh no, they can't beat Percival and Milady. What a shame. But strong unit, if you enjoy using her, if you enjoy training her up, this is actually the perfect chapter to do so. Because you could look at the level 1 and be like, oh, how terrible. Dude, where are we going to find a bunch of XP for a sword unit in the next 4 chapters? It's like the hardest thing in the world to find. No, and you'll be able to level it up just fine.
It's true. I will say level 1 is like, it's good for XP and for getting level ups. It's kind of bad if you want to promote ASAP, which is, I think, what Swordmasters want. But for Fear in particular, I think you'd first want a lot, like at least a couple levels to get her speed and skill to really high levels, and then strength, hopefully get some proc. She does only have a 75% or a, well, she has a 75% chance to whiff on, this is also a problem for her, I guess, but that's because she got injured. But she also,
thanks, Lance.
She only has a 25% strength growth, which can be kind of bad. But her base is pretty good for our level, so usually it works out.
Ooh.
So this is a really, really powerful unit. Usually bow units are not that strong in Fire Emblem, but I think this might be one of the best ones in the series. Again, on account of like those insane bases, on top of being able to gain a bunch of experience, is just a really good combo. Shin is very fast, he's got good strength overall, and avoiding counterattacks with bows is pretty good in this game. Before, we've kind of used that phrase as like a way to mitigate the flaws of units we're discussing, like Walt and Dorothy and Sue. But then Shin is just a unit that's like really solid all around, and then he has bows on top of that. So now you get to use all the strength of the bows on a really good unit. So he's able to snipe from a distance, avoid counterattacks, kill flyers, but actually be really good and accurate at it. Super solid. Unlike the Hero Crest units or Knight Crest units, he doesn't have a whole lot of competition for promotion items either, besides the Orion's Bolt. I mean, like, Sue wants one, but you're probably not using both Sue and Shin. Partially because of the Orion's Bolt thing, and also just because I think it's just generally, this is kind of a unit you don't need that many of, but you kind of want one at least on your team. And then Shin also, he's the best out of the whole bunch that uses the Orion's Bolt. Now, in this patch, there is one other user of the Orion's Bolt, which is Lyn. I haven't said that much before, but I see it in the comments all the time, so I better just repeat it. Lyn uses an Orion's Bolt, so both her and Shin are going to compete for one. But fortunately, I think we get 2 at a pretty soon time. I think we get 2 in the next map, actually, if not the next 2 maps. So I think we're solid on that front.
It'll depend on whether we're going by Trey or Echidna route.
Yeah, which is
how soon we get the Orion's Bolt.
Yeah, and
but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, sure. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to say on Shin is just that he has a really good 8 stat, because he used the male 8 formula, so he gets 25 base 8, and then he has relatively low constitution, so only 18 8 is remaining, which is enough to rescue almost anyone in the game. And then even when he promotes, he still rescues almost anyone.
He can rescue Barth.
I know, right?
What a
it's
man.
Insane. He can pick up Legos.
He doesn't step on them.
You have anything to add on Shin?
Nah, you pretty much said it all. His stats are really great. He's got these hard mode bonuses coming in. I will object to the 2 nomads thing. 2 nomads is very fun, because then you definitely go to Sakai.
True enough. That is the main drawback of using these nomads, is that they compete with the Pegasi for XP, and whoever has more XP determines which route you go to later. Not this upcoming Rust split, but one that comes up later. And I want to go to the Pegasus one, so I need the Pegasus to be higher XP, which is why I fed Shanna some kills, even though she's not really a long-term unit.
Is that the drawback, or is that the benefit?
Yes. What up, boys? It's your man, Geese. Honestly, one of the best portraits in this entire game. Super, super fabulous looking. Amazing anime hair, 10 out of 10.
Oh, that's true. L'Oreal.
Unit-wise, Geese is known for being a most balanced version of all the axe fighters you get, because as you can see, his bases are like 10s and 9s across most of the areas with like a big fat 0 in resistance. This balance is why people were often conflicted about him, because they weren't sure whether he is better or worse than his competition like Gonzalez and the fighters. I think he's overall kind of like an average unit, because he doesn't stand out enough in any of these areas to really hit the benchmarks that you want a unit to hit. For example, he has more speed than someone like Wade or even Lot, I believe, but that speed is not enough to double, and it still gets doubled occasionally. His strength is not as overkill high as someone like Gonzalez or Wade again, but that means he sometimes doesn't even two-shot enemies or hit one-shot benchmarks or thresholds. So I just don't find him super useful in raw statistics, but he does have a really awesome class of going Pirate and Berserker. Gives him the utility to walk over mountains and oceans and stuff sometimes, which can be convenient. And of course, Berserker has that amazing crit boost. He also joins at a level where you can reasonably promote him without having to wait or train him. I don't find that Geese turns out very well if you do this immediately, but at the same time I also don't really enjoy training a unit like this, because his XP gain is not as fast as someone like Lilina's, where they're super on the level. He's just level 10, he's gonna get like 20 to 30 XP per kill, so it's hard to really get mileage out of him unpromoted too. So I'm always kind of conflicted like how Geese is best used and how you can make him perform optimally, because I feel like none of these ways are very good, but I think Geese is just a more average unit in a game that has both really good and really bad units. So I can never give him too bad of a rating. The Berserker class is really awesome, but it kind of carries Geese all the way. I don't really find anything else that really makes him worth using, but maybe your mind is different than mine?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the Berserker class, and it's like we're already really tight on Hero Crest. It's like now we want to feed another mouth? Like,
yeah.
Bro. I don't know about that. To be honest, I really don't have much experience with Geese, mostly because I'm a big Gonzalez fan, and usually my second Hero Crest is going to, either him or Fear. Depends on my mood. But he's a unit, right? Like he's
definitely in the game.
Maybe, yeah, he can deal like 30 damage or 50 damage to a wall with a Brave Axe or something if he wants to. Maybe. I don't know. At least he has Brave Axe rank. How much might does the Brave Axe have?
It's the same as the Steel Axe, I believe. 10?
Ooh, 10. So he does 40 damage.
Yeah.
No.
I like that you mentioned the wall, because it's the one enemy that he has 100% hit against. His accuracy is also pretty bad. Like his skill is supposed to be better than some of the fighters we've discussed, for example, or like Gonzalez, but it's still not good enough to get reliable hit rates, because like a lot of people will try to Brave Axe and find that it is really inaccurate, which sucks. I'm gonna have him get the village because he has Water Walk. And like I said, like you said, Hero Crest competition is absolutely a big problem for him. There's just way too many units that need the Hero Crest in this game.
I think like the issue of the Brave Axe is a bit overstated, because even though it certainly has less raw accuracy than all the other axes, you get 2 chances at it, right? So
I suppose, but at the same time, it weighs him down to the point where missing can be disastrous for him if it goes wrong. Like it weighs so much, and the accuracy is
I was going to mention the 9-con.
Yeah,
or not the 9-con, the 11-con.
Yeah, that's another good point. It makes him easier to carry around than someone like Gonzalez, who has like 15-con, for example, or even Wade, or even Deke. But at the same time, it also makes him less able to carry units sometimes, or like help in rescue drops, and it of course weighs him down more when he's using heavy axes like the Brave Axe. So it's a two-sided sword, I guess. The look of sorrow in his eyes. Very much a look of sorrow.
He's just a nice guy.
Okay, we made him blue.
Brigand.
Yeah, I think this is not the first playable Brigand in the series. Marty came first in Thracia, but he is the first that a lot of people have played with, because FE6 is just a natural stepping stone after FE7 and FE8, which are a lot of people's first games, including mine. I love Gonzalez. As I said, he's one of my favorites, and in this game, he's really, really good at combat.
He has the pathway to many abilities some consider unnatural.
He does look a little unnatural, but don't hold it against him. He has, I think, the best, if not one of the best, combinations of strength and speed in this entire game. He's exceedingly fast compared to most Brigands in this game, and his strength is 4 from the cap unpromoted at level 5. If you recruit Gonzalez on the other route, the B route, we're on the A route right now, but we could be on the B route. He has the same base stats, but his level will be, I think, 11, if not 13. I always confuse the two.
I think it's 11.
Yeah, I think so too. And both of these have their pros and cons. The great thing about the level 5 Gonzalez is you can train him, have more levels, and have faster XP gain at these levels. But of course, the other one can be promoted at base level, which can also be nice because he has the same Berserker class that Geese does. So the same crit bonus. The great thing about Gonzalez is his skill might be awful, but because he doubles more often than most of your axe users, most of your other berserkers, and because he has, you know, better stats overall, the crits can usually make up for the misses, which can be very convenient. Like if he doubles a guy and he 2 KOs him, but he misses one shot, he can always crit the other one. And with killer axes that are viable next chapter, that's actually very possible to set up reliably. In addition, though, I gotta say, again, another hero crest unit, so he's behind Rutger, Deke, Uujay, Fir, Geese, Wade, and Lot, and it's like, geez, this is so many hero crest units in this game. I don't know what they were thinking. Later on, they make... I actually don't think they did anything to fix bandit promotions, but they gotta make the Ocean Seal for pirates, probably for that reason. But in this game, we're stuck with hero crest once again, and it sucks. But if you want to use Gonzalez, I cannot recommend him enough. He's super fun to use. A little heavy, though.
Super good. I will say too, not the bandit to bandit berserker promotion actually does fix a lot of it. It gives a whopping +5 speed. I don't like spoiling promotion gains here, but like not +5 speed, a whopping +5 skill rather.
Mm-hmm.
Which you might think like, oh come on, it's the plus skill part of promotion gain. That's +5 skill though.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's 10 hit. That's what's
insane.
That's a lot of hit.
It's great. We have a new unit, a dancer, pretty good one. We should probably talk about her. Larum, yeah. I think there's a localization to call her Larum as well, but we'll probably end up calling her Larum a lot because that's what her name tag says here. Very good unit despite all the stats because dancing is super good. I think this is the best game for GPA dancers because there's almost always something to do for dancers in this game. You have a ton of meaning and like rush jumping around, and it's not easy to keep them safe because ambush reinforcements and generally high move enemies with a lot of power and range. But it's so rewarding to use her well because extra actions, extra movements, they almost always pay off in some way when planned well. Of course, when improvising like I'm doing here, that's a little bit tricky, so don't take my demonstration as a demonstration of how to use Larum because it's guaranteed to go wrong at least once. But she's super, super useful and you should deploy her for every map, I would say, in this game that she's around it. There might be some exceptions where it's easier not to use her, but I can't come up with any on my head. Super great unit, should always use. If you don't know how to use a dancer well, practice all you can because it's super rewarding.
Oh, it's super good. Yeah, I think the only map I can think of where maybe you wouldn't want to deploy Larum is like Chapter 20 Sakai if you're not clearing it super quick with the Warp Staff.
Oh yeah.
Just because like there's siege domes that could attack your dancer. But yeah, no, everything you said is true. Her stats may be a bit meager, but again, she's a dancer. She doesn't need stats. Like, you hit the dance button, doesn't do a check or like have a miss rate or anything. Imagine.
It's like, you're too slow. I'm not dancing for you.
No, the dance wasn't good enough. Sorry, you just don't get your turn back. Yeah, no, great dancer, great unit. You get it right here. I will say, we are currently actually on one of the route splits, so if you're expecting instead to see a bard called Klein, or not Klein, a bard called Elfin, that's because we took a different route split. So if we had gone to the other one by visiting a different village, then we would have had a completely different chapter last map and this map. And instead of getting Larum, we would have gotten Elfin, and there's also one other unit, whom we'll get later.
Yeah.
And we can talk about.
And they have exclusive music, yay!
That's true, and cute animation.
Yeah. They're dancing like MC Hammer pants, it's very cool. And then there will be Brigand coming out of that cave, I think, but that's fine. Let's go get... Yeah, okay, well, Klein good. I just showed him why he's good.
So I know.
Okay. Let me see, how long have we been going anyway? A while. We can go a little bit longer. Let's talk Klein.
Yeah. Hard mode bonuses, the sniper.
The unit. Klein is, I think, the main reason why people will say, okay, archers in this game, kind of poopy. Sniper is in this game pretty good. His stats are solid. I wouldn't say his speed is sufficient to double everything, but he can double some of the mid to slow enemies to the point where he's doing significant damage. And even if he's not killing an enemy, it's honestly pretty good because he's not a great XP investment, but he's a great temporary unit to set up kills for others with. The silver bow he comes with is great for that. He can also use longbows, iron bows, whatever you want him to use really to get an enemy down to like enough HP to kill with another unit that you're training. And he has some decent growth as well, I believe, but that's generally not the reason I use him because he grows so slowly. He's pre-promoted at a point in the game where most enemies are still unpromoted, so his XP gain is really too slow to really make use of. But as a chip bot, as a unit to deploy for like the next 4 or 5 maps, it's pretty good. And of course, this game has plenty of wyvern riders to shoot down as well. And you can usually Oko down with the silver bow, which is pretty convenient. So I like Klein. I wouldn't use him for the entire game. I have done it before, but I feel like his main utility is the next like 5 chapters or so.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, if you take Klein and use him for the whole game, it's like there's nothing wrong with that. He's a really good unit, to be honest with you. We did have a hard mode unit enter, so his stats were rolled a bit. I think his luck and his HP were 1 below average on this roll, but otherwise everything else is in line. It's very solid. Super good Klein. Yeah, no, I mean, like, people say bow's kind of bad, but like accurate weapon at 2 range on a strong unit, I don't know, man. Seems kind of good to me.
Okay, so we have a second Pegasus Knight now, and we haven't trained her first, so I was actually heavily considering using Tate because I've never used her throughout the whole game, and I was just curious about trying her out. Also because it's one of those units that I've never been a really big fan of, and I just wanted to see if I could change my initial perception. But then I remembered how tight my unit slots usually are and how many units I'm trying to fit into this small roster. I've already had to bench Wade because he just wasn't performing up to snuff, and like, maybe I don't feel like doing it anymore because I don't remember Tate being particularly fun to use. But their stats are like archetypical Pegasus Knight kind of, like lowish HP and defense, good speed, but they're not good enough to really hold a candle to the enemies. I think that my biggest problem with Tate is that she has D-rank lances, so she cannot use, for example, the Axe Reaver, I believe, to kill fighters with easily. And she's also incapable of using killer lances at base, which is something that becomes important later on. So you can probably get to the nice C-rank lances when you actually get to buy killer lances, but that would require training her, of course. I guess if you are using Tate, then you'll probably get there. But I guess the other problem with Pegasus Knights in general is they get weighed down by their weapons, and I can usually offset it with Shanna by this time because her speed has been so good. When you train her, she's like gonna have like 20 speed at this point. But she's just starting at 14, and with an Iron Lance that goes down to 11, which doesn't double anything. And then she's just, I don't know, she feels fragile and bad to use. And this is in spite of her getting hard mode bonuses too. They're just not very much because her normal mode bases are just so trash. So I've never really had a good time trying to use Tate.
Bases are really bad.
Yeah. But I will say there was one time in Done on 0% Growth playthrough where she like one-rounded someone, like an enemy Cavalier with a Horse Slayer at base. I was like, wow, this is one of the few units in FE6 who actually one-rounds something, I guess. I thought that was kind of a funny anecdote about Tate, but other than that, I've only seen misery with her, so I don't like it very much. But I do know the Pegasus Knight class itself is, of course, useful. I just find her combat very miserable to work with. That's my experience with Tate.
Yeah, I've used her in a couple playthroughs. I will say this particular Tate is actually kind of unlucky. She rolled -1 on HP, skill, and speed, according to her expectation.
Yikes.
+1 res, but like, it's still woohoo. So we're kind of working with a bit of a bad Tate here. Okay. I will say that what you were describing, where she has a lot of trouble in the early parts, is pretty true, because next chapter is like all warriors and bow units behind walls and whatnot, which is terrible for her.
Yeah.
And then the guide after that is like all axe units and fog of war, which is terrible for her. So like, yeah, she definitely has a very bad first impression. She does pretty fine in chapter 13. Oftentimes when I use Tate, I just kind of like more or less bench her until chapter 13, which is when I actually start like deploying her. I can use a Horse Slayer or whatnot. You mentioned the D-rank lances, but she is only 2 levels away from Falcon Knight promotion, which gives her a lance rank. Mm-hmm. So even if she miraculously gets no weapon XP, she can still use killer lances by the time she hits Falcon Knight as well. So she is, again, Pegasus Knights and Falcon Knights are a good class. If you want to use her, it's probably in addition to Shanna, in addition to Milady. But no, I mean, she's an okay unit. She's not the best unit in the game. She's probably still in the top half, though.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. And of course, she helps you go to the Ilia route if you want to go there, which I think I'm still good on that because I got Shanna trained for a couple levels above Shin, so probably fine in that aspect.
Problem, you all right? Yeah, she's pretty good actually. Yo, Echidna.
Yo,
damn.
Female hero, one of the first in the series, one of the coolest in the series, and for a long time, really underrated units. Nowadays, I think when you ask someone what an underrated unit is, everyone will say Echidna, and as a result, she's not underrated anymore.
That's true.
But those bases, though, that speed and skill is very, very good. Khan is high enough to use swords and axes for the most part, with minimal to no consequent loss, because even if she loses some speed, she's generally still doubling. Her strength base is higher than most of the characters we have. Now, I know most of my characters are frill sword users, but please ignore that for a moment. Her strength is pretty good, good enough to 2-round with some of the heavier stuff. We just bought like 5 killer axes, so she'll probably be able to use those to her advantage if you want to field her. The main advantages to Echidna are just a good start that you don't have to train her for. The disadvantages are that she doesn't last forever in this game. Like, there are spots in this game where she's definitely worse off than right now. You could say she falls off a little bit. Mostly on account of her somewhat poor durability on the whole and her bad growths. But for the amount of work that we have to put into Echidna, which is 0, she's absolutely stunning. The Steel Axe makes her look a bit bad because it weighs her down a bunch, but with like Killing Edges or Killer Axes, or even just an Iron Sword, she's really good. She has 1-2 range with the Hand Axe if you wanted to have it, with minimal loss. And then B Axes, that's her to use pretty much everything you want, and the same goes for C Swords. So fantastic right now, and still usable later on. Yeah, pretty good for a foot unit, especially.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The thing is with the kitten is like, because she has such high speed and such high skill, and the heavier weapons tend to reduce your speed and reduce your skill, or at least reduce your hit rate, which is basically skill. Echidna has, even though she only has 6 movement, she has complete control over the range at which she engages and the speed and damage that she does. So she just has like so many options. If you need, you know, if you're facing a slow target, then you can pull out a Steel Axe as she has right now, pull out a hammer. Well, maybe not a hammer, but like pull out a heavier weapon, right? Pull out a blade if you want. Use that if you decide you need accuracy because you're up against like a faster or a less defensive target. You can even put on an Iron Sword or a Steel Sword. She just has so many great options. It's kind of the case that anytime you have a character with high skill and high speed, you should think of that as, okay, these are resources that I can spend on heavier and less accurate weapons if I want to. And if it's not advantageous to do so, if I'm up against someone fast or someone dodgy, then I can use the more accurate weapons still, and I can take advantage of the skill and speed. So she, like, really good character all around. There is the comparison to make to Bartray, which is a character that we're not getting. I think you did a Samson Aran tier list kind of thing recently, right?
Yeah, I did.
Where it was like speaking about the pros and cons of Echidna versus Bartray. That's kind of a conversation that's outside of the scope of this video, and probably go and see the other one that Mecca put out, like I think it was about a week ago.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about Echidna versus Bartray specifically.
Roughly. Aaron Sampson archetype tier list, I think is what I call them. Okay.
Is it time for a Cath analysis video?
It is time for Cath analysis. Just let me send my next Spirit Legion whip to the convo, and then we'll talk some Cath. So I have said before that thieves don't really need stats to do anything. We said this about Chad. We kind of said it about Astor. I think it really rings true for Cath. A lot of people still don't like her because it's like really superfluous to have her at this point if you're not Iron Manning and lost some thieves. Like, why would you ever need a third thief when... I mean, I think this is the first chapter where I deployed 2 at all. And then still could have been replaced by Doors Keys and Chest Keys sometimes. But in the context of FE6, where they tried to make these kind of replacement units, I think it's still fair to value Cath for her thievery. I generally just give her credit for the thievery that occurs after she joins. So basically everything in like chapter 16, for example. But then like a third of it, because you could also have used Chad or Astor. And I still think that's better than a unit that's not very good at combat. So I wouldn't compare her to a good combat unit like, I don't know, Alan or Lance, or a good utility unit like Saul or Laurum. But I still think she's alright, and there are definitely chapters where I would deploy her in an Iron Man, for example, if I lost a Thief. And honestly, I think it also serves to her credit that even if she's not the best option technically for a Thief, because her stats are some of the lowest ones, she's still good enough at her job to where you could field her and not lose out on anything. And also, her bases are just better than Chad, so if you haven't trained Chad at all, which I think you shouldn't, then she's still better off for the most part. She's still absolute garbo. Like, at this point in the game, if you're sword locked and you have 3 strength, I'm sorry, but you're not a combat unit. And if there's a bolting that ever hits her, she's probably dead anyway, but the same goes for Chad most of the time, so you might as well just replace Chad with Cath if you're doing that. And I'll probably do that, because, I don't know, I think Cath is funny, plus Female Thief is kind of a novelty. I don't know what her growths are, I know they're pretty good, but raising her is yuck, don't do it. It's not a good idea.
I think she is the highest in the game outside of Karel and Fa.
Really?
But like, yeah, she's a thief with 15 levels. Like, she is legally allowed to attack. You know, according to the law, but don't tell her that. But, yeah, no, she's fine. Like, you don't need stats to be a thief. You can steal the Delphi Shield. There have been some, I don't want to say like LTC, but kind of like fast play strats that did require deploying 3 thieves to steal chests very quickly, or to open doors very quickly, or to steal things quickly. So maybe if you're super creative, you might be like, okay, well, I just need like a lot of stealing on this map. I think chapter 16 is one of those where you kind of wanted like a lot of thieves everywhere. Or again, you could just use keys. So again, just take a unit. If you like a thief, just use her. Like, I didn't actually realize, but yeah, she is just better than Chad at base. This might be the hard mode bonuses though.
Yeah, I mean, I know her hard mode bonuses are particularly shitty because thieves just don't have very good class growths, but they don't mean a whole lot. I mean, Chad is right here. We can check real quick. I don't think he's gonna gain a single level. Their bases in strength are actually equal, but she has like 4 more HP and 5 more speed, for example. So I guess
What's
it's
her normal mode base? I'm gonna look it up. I was still the same. Still 3 base strength.
Okay. Ray. I was outside earlier, just taking a walk, taking a break, and I had a shower thought, even though I wasn't in the shower. I feel like Ray is like the magical equivalent of Geese in this game, where his stats all around are pretty middling to the point where none of them stand out enough for him to be an outstanding unit. His magic is pretty high, but then everything else is a bit too low to work well. That speed is basically 8 because he gets weighed down by Flux, as far as I remember. Right now he's Nosferatu, which weighs 6, but Flux weighs 5, so he will have 8 speed, which sounds kind of average, but at this point in the game, it's not going to double anything, and then enemies that are slightly faster than usual, not just Mercenaries and Myrmidons, but I think even something like a Killer Lance Cavalier, for example, would double him. So that makes his durability really bad on enemy phase. And so even though his stats in some games would be considered average, I think in this game you could confidently call some of them pretty bad, particularly speed and durability. So in that way, I think Ray has always been a bit of a disappointment for me. I'm used to, for example, FE7 Canas, who I think is really good. And even though Canas is roughly the same base speed, he just feels way different for some reason.
He's in an easier game.
Yeah, sure. that makes a big difference, I think. Enemies are just slower, and you have to hit less thresholds to be really good. I do think he has a pretty good promotion bonus to Druid. I don't remember if it's as ridiculous as Canas' bonus, but it kind of works out. And then, in addition, just accuracy problems, and that's not great. 1-2 range and rest hitting, of course, kind of makes up for a lot of it. But if you're expecting Canas when using Ray, you will be disappointed. Now, if you just really like Dark Mages to begin with, you can still use him just fine. I used him on my first playthrough on normal mode and had a ton of fun with him. You get in S-rank Dark Tone later on that only a couple characters can use, and it's a really good one because it gives +5 magic, it has insane might and a really fun animation. So unit feel wise, Ray can still work out. I wouldn't recommend him for a first time hard mode playthrough. I would definitely caution against using him. It can still work. I guess that's like one sad thing about Ray is even though he is an enemy, he does not get hard mode bonuses because these only exist for units that spawn on the map as reinforcements. And it just so happens that almost all the enemy units that you fight, that you can recruit in this game, are reinforcements. Rutger, Milady, Fir, Shin, they all get hard mode bonuses, but Ray is loaded differently, and so he doesn't get hard mode bonuses. It's unfair, but it is how it is. And because of that, I can't really recommend using him because his stats aren't very great. But if you want to, you can.
It's so funny. I have only good memories of using Ray, but then you open up his stat screen and started talking trash about him. I'm like, you kind of like, what is this guy? I guess he wields dark magic, which is a nice plus. Like, dark magic in this game is actually kind of strong. The tomes are light, Flux hits hard, Nosferatu's Nosferatu, actually very valuable here. And I think his stats at Druid are passable, and at the very least he's at promotion level. On normal mode, they're passable. I really don't have much experience using him in hard mode, though. I think for the reasons you said before, I like loaded him in one map, was like, oh, this is no good, and then promptly forgot about him. He's a cool dude, though.
Yeah. Do you reckon it's better to use Ray as promote him as soon as possible, or raise him a couple times? Because I feel like his XP gain is too slow, and his growth's not good enough to warrant raising him a lot in his unpromoted state, but at the same time, it feels like you have to deal with his bad stats for longer than you need to. It's the same dilemma I have with Geese, if you recall, where it's like, okay, we have a slightly unleveled unit, that's a promo level, do we promote him ASAP or not?
Yeah, I think I want to say insta-promote him, but then the issue is you got to use a guiding ring on that, and those are kind of valuable.
Yeah, that's the other problem he
like,
has.
It's not worth the guiding ring, I don't think.
Are you ready for the best unit in this part of the game, probably? Milady. Best wife provider in the series. Arguably, maybe, one of the best units, I think, in this series.
Some say the best unit in this game.
I would agree with that, I think. I'm not sure, because I'm always, like, deciding between her and Rutger, and then, like, you could argue when Percival is actually there, he's also on par with her. But there's no doubt that for anyone, that Milady in hard mode is one of the most amazing units ever created. Generally, combat in this game tends to be pretty difficult because there's very few units that have good offense and good defense, as well as good mobility. You could argue Rutger has good enough durability to qualify, but he's not as mobile as Milady is. But Milady just comes in here with like almost 40 HP, better strength and defense than I think everyone on our team. Maybe like Alan can maybe tie her in strength, that's about it. And I guess his speed is better because he's got the speed wing, but then her defense is just insane. I guess supports kind of make her lose out, but just the fact that she compares as a level 10 Wyvern Rider while our other units are like promoted says a lot about how strong she is. And then she flies so she can like get the best positioning possible, build people out all the time. And she has enough con to not get weighed down by lances and like your Pegasus Knights, so that makes her even faster. and flying tanks are super useful, and this is one of the few units that can actually one-out enemies using just plain iron weapons. It's insane how good she is. I love using Milady. There's not a whole lot more to say about her besides like super good at fighting. I guess her one weakness would be that she is the flyer weaknesses like arrows and air caliber, but you do pick up a Delphi Shield Leader that will help with that as well, so even that is covered at some point. Insanely good unit. Love her to death.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things like, oh, she doesn't have good supports. It's like, that's such a nitpick, dude. Like, supports can make someone good, bad supports don't make someone bad. Alright? Like, get out of here. Don't do that. But yeah, Milady, kind of like you were saying, you were debating if it's like Rutger or Percival. There's like a list of 5-ish units where if you say, oh, this is the best unit in FE6, I'm not even going to argue with you. Like, you're probably right in your own mind. And Milady's definitely probably at the top of that list. So, ours does have some hard mode bonuses, I will say. If you're playing on normal mode, expect your Milady to be like much weaker. But with hard mode bonuses, remember, the enemies get the exact same ones. So, normal mode Milady will still do as well against the enemies as this hard mode Milady that you're seeing right now. She'll just compare differently against your own units when you're doing that. Ours did roll a little bit under strength and a little bit over HP, but otherwise is like performing exactly as expected. So I'm looking forward to it. The only question is, she's level 10. Are we promoting her right away? Are we waiting? What's the goal?
I think we're waiting a little bit. I generally like to give Milady a couple levels. I've not often seen a couple levels make a big difference on any unit ever, but it just feels weird to promote her when she's doing fine unpromoted. Generally when, like, some people think that I advocate for promoting right away, always, whenever. The truth is, I think you should promote when you feel like your unit needs the boost to keep performing well, and when their XP gain is no longer so fast that you can justify keeping them unpromoted. That's the way I see it. Okay, let's go Cecilia over here. I like her a lot. It's one of my favorite units. That's why I made a waifu video about her. The way I love to describe Cecilia is that everything about her is really good except for her stats and then her joining map. I think her joining map is the main cause of her having a bad reputation among the fan base because it gives a bad first impression, even though she's actually really good for all the maps after this. This one, I will admit, she's not too hot with only 10 move or only 2 move across desert tiles, but after this map it goes up to 8, and from there it's one of those varied utility units you can possibly have, with like a C rank and stats for restore, which is very important in this game. She can't use physic, but she can use like mend, recover, hammer, and she can rescue people, of course. She has an A rank in anima, she can use like air caliber for some pretty okay chip. Not excellent, but it does some damage. It's usually without risk because magic doesn't need counterattacks, and because enemy resistance is kind of low, she still does like respectable damage. The most annoying thing I find about Cecilia, besides her joining situation, is her low base skill of 7, which, even though I always like to compare anima magic to like homing missiles, 7 skill is so low that she often ends up missing, and that also isn't really helped by her first impression because the desert tiles, they all give 5 avoid, so that even adds to her inaccuracy problems sometimes. But other than that, I love this using this unit in almost every playthrough, despite the terrible stats, because her utility is so magnificent and so awesome.
Yeah, you've done a huge video on her, and like, frankly, go ahead and look at that if you want another like 30 minutes of analysis. I think is what you put in there. I will say, actually, I don't think she's really that terrible in this map because of the 14 aid. She's really good at like coordinating with other units to do rescue maneuvers or like take drops and whatnot. So she can actually just really help out in that regard too, even though she may not be able to carry units very quickly. Like, in a sense, if you like get in front of someone and then you take their rescued unit and drop them, you essentially give them 2 extra move. So, like, that alone is some extra utility. Like, she can basically have 4 move on your team in 1 turn if you do a move like that. So, but yeah, no, air caliber good. I haven't really run into the skill issue much. I guess like maybe I just use a lot of fire with her air caliber.
That is a great
maybe
way to say, yeah.
Or weighed down by steel lance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just strong unit.
Yeah, pretty nice. Okay, so we got that covered, and then we might as well just jump straight into Sophia. I said Arcadia is one of the most hated maps in the whole franchise, and I think Sophia is one of the reasons for it, because you have to keep her alive throughout this treacherous map, and if you don't know where the enemies are, then Sophia is basically already dead, because her stats do not allow her to take any hits whatsoever, and she cannot really fend for herself at all. I think her durability might be the worst in the game, and that's like not even taking into account her joining time. Like, she also joins like super late. 16 total durability, that's like FE5 Safi level terrible, and then there's no other ways to compensate for it in her stat layout. Her magic is off, what, 6? The most funny comparison I've ever heard of someone is like comparing her to like saying she's Lilina's evil twin. Like Lina's already underleveled and terrible, and then Sophia is even worse than that. Of course, my Lilina is already long caught up, but Sophia at this point is horrendous. Also not helped by the sand and everything, and enemies having actual void because she has 75 hit before enemy avoid. Now I know you said you used Fire with Cecilia to avoid hit issues, but I don't think there's any way to avoid them with Sophia because she has like sub 50 hit on almost everything. The two-run system works against her, and even when she hits, she's not killing anything. So terrible, but you got to keep her alive for this entire map, both to get the guiding ring that she can find around here that only she can find, and to get the guiding map afterwards, the 14x to get the 4 blaze for the good ending. So you don't want to, but you have to use her in some capacity.
It's true. You do get to escort her up there. So depending on who you talk to, Sophia is either the worst unit in the game or it's like Wendy or something. But like a large proportion of people say Sophia is the worst person in the game, or the worst unit in the game rather. Maybe not the worst person. I don't know yet. But like, and before people come crawling out of the woodwork, it's like, well, actually, Sophia, if you train her, she can do well. Yeah, it's true. This is Fire Emblem. That's how the game works. But. Yeah, no, her stats and join time are very disadvantageous. You know, if you force deploy Sophia here, get the guiding ring, and then never deploy her again, then like, yeah, I'm sure you're probably doing it right.
I will say one last thing about Sophia while I get going on my first turn 1 plan is she does have 2 support partners that join later, Fa and Agren. I think both of them give her a pretty good amount of hit thanks to her dark affinity, and that can sort of shore up her issues. So if you're someone who likes these kind of units work, or likes to make them work, then that would be a good place to start. I saw this exact question popped up in like a Reddit question thread at some point. So that might be up your alley if you like using, challenging units. Anyway,
another thing that can make them work is the nifty desert item trick. In case we have any desire to show that off today, but maybe we'll.
Anyway, how about this unit that we just got, the female version of Klein. Good old.
That female version of Klein.
Yes, Igren. Hold on, let me get the growth up here. I like Igren a lot as a temporary units. She's generally compared to Klein because they have a similar role, right? They join both around the mid game as a sniper, but there's some crucial differences between them that I want to highlight because her utility largely overlaps with Klein for good reason. 6 move, bow locked unit, which is pretty good in this game. Like shooting down wyverns is nice, and having 2 range, not taking counterattacks, all that stuff, pretty good. The biggest difference for me is one is Igren is significantly faster. She has 15 speed. If we take a look at Klein real quick, he has 13 speed right now, and I think he might have gotten speed on his level ups too. His stats fluctuate a little bit with hardware bonuses as well. But 15 speed, I think, it hits like a certain enemy tier for double attacks that Klein doesn't. So that's a big difference. The other big difference that I've usually noticed is that Igren has a B in bows, whereas Klein has A at base, and he joins earlier. So Klein has an easier Klein can use the silver bow, and then Igren doesn't for a long time. And then on top of that, Klein has a bit of an easier time getting to Merglaze. It takes a little while for Igren to even get to A rank, because 50 weapon XP is a lot at this point in the game, especially when you only attack once per turn. That's kind of it for me. I don't think there's a whole lot of other differences. If you generally don't really want 2 snipers on the field that much, so if you're using Klein, this might be a good time to replace him with Igren. But if you do like them both, you can of course use them both. But I think she's a pretty fine temp, and I plan to deploy her for a couple chapters as long as I have the space to do it. She can still use the killer bow with B-bows, so that's like the most important weapon for her to use. And she joins with 1-2 for convenience's sake, so pretty usable off the bat. Just use her, she's fun.
So I'm trying to look through my friends list and find all the people who don't want 2 snipers on the field all the time, Like, man, it's kind of hard to see. So, like, I know you just said you don't want 2 snipers, but, I also said friends list. No, I'm kidding.
Pitfalls. Pitfall.
Pitfall. No, I like snipers. But point being, yeah, it's pretty natural to compare her to Klein. I think in normal mode in particular, the comparison is like, do you want Klein's weapon rank for silver bow, which is really good against fires, or do you want Green for the stats? In this case, the disparity is a bit smaller. Klein's stats are a bit more comparable to Igreen's, as you said. I think her bases are actually still higher than most hard mode Klein's, except in like 1 or 2 stats, like HP, maybe. Like hard mode Klein is expected to have 33, whereas this Igreen has this Igreen frankly has higher stats in pretty much all categories.
Yeah.
I will say too, Klein does have pretty much strictly higher growths than Igreen. I think like HP is the only thing where Igreen has more than he does, but like growths moment. It's very natural to use either one of them. Like use whichever one is good. If you feel the need for silver bow, use Klein. If Igreen stats are better, use Igreen. I don't really think there's much of a need to show long-term favoritism towards one or the other. They're both in roles that work kind of well without supports, and their affinities are kind of crap anyway. Like Ice Affinity is not really that good. I'm not in a hurry to put supports on them, which, and in my mind at least, supports are usually like the main thing that would require both long-term investment and long-term use of a unit in order to get out of. Whereas these units are like, they're such complete packages already. Just deploy whichever one is the most appropriate for the situation at hand. Like, you have the unit deployment screen for a reason. Like, go out, look at the enemies, figure out what you need, and then deploy what you need.
Yeah, if you're trying to use Sophia, then get Egran on your field.
I know.
Okay. All right. The big boss is here. Big Percival with his juicy A swords, A lances, C axes, and stats into 20s in all the relevant areas. Super strong unit, very powerful, easiest to use in the franchise probably. Just throw them at enemies and they will die. There's not a whole lot to say about like how good his stats are, and like when it comes to HP and strength and speed, it's like immediately obvious. And even defense is like, okay, so he takes it like a champ. One feature of Percival that I want to highlight real quick here, because I don't want to state the obvious too much, is high res. It's a pretty rare thing among physical units to have good res. I think is actually higher than the res of most Pegasus Knights, and that really says something, because you're supposed to have above average high res. Between that high HP and the high res, Percival is ideal for taking on mages, especially because you can use like all these silver weapons to take them on, or even like divine weapons when you have them to S rank. In generally swords or lances, both will work. And with that, he could just two-shot them, not care about air caliber. Just like the one weakness of Milady sometimes, who I think is the other best juggernaut at this point in the game, is not being able to take on mages, especially those with air caliber. So Percival really solves that very well. But then in general, just Paladin is just a good class, having the ability to use 3 different weapon types, and you can even use javelins and hand axes pretty effectively because his skill is so good. I guess the one thing he would lack compared to your Cavaliers at this point would be supports. If you use like Allen and Lance both, for example, with any support together, you're probably going to support like better combat overall thanks to those support bonuses, mostly in a void. But regardless, Percival is still going to crush everything. Part of the power of his stats does come from Harper bonuses. He gets a lot of them, just like Zeiss is going to get in the chapter, for example. But even without them, even in normal mode, Percival is still like a very, very strong, powerful character that you should always use if you have a space for him, because he's almost always going to be better than whatever your 10th best unit is. So really good, but not a whole lot to say on him. He's just that fun.
Yeah, another one. I think whenever we got Milady, I said the same line of there's a list of like 3 or 4 units where if you just came out and said this is the strongest unit in Binding Blade, I wouldn't argue with you. Percival's definitely one of them, right? Like he's super good, just giant ball of stats. I will say full control over the weapon triangle was actually pretty good. I know a lot of people meme about FE6 weapon triangle being like, oh no, only 10 points. Well, if you can go from disadvantage to advantage, that's a 20-point swing in hit and avoid, and a 1-point swing in might. That's pretty good. I think Percival probably has the strongest one-range combat out of anyone in the game. Just the ability to always have weapon triangle advantage, the ability to use whatever effective weapons he needs to use, the ability to not get weighed down by anything. The ability to use whatever the strongest weapon in your convoy is also pretty important too. Like, kind of an advantage of having good weapon ranks is if you have it in the convoy, he can probably use it. Like, and he frees up the other good weapons for your other units to use in case. Like, there's very little opportunity cost using Percival. He's super versatile. So, just super strong unit all around. You pointed out his mage killing utility, and it's like, I didn't even think about that. I just like, mages, non-mages, they all die.
It's better every time I look at him. The reason I brought up Mage units is like there's not many units that can do that. Like I said, it's the weakness of like a lot of units. They can't take him on very well. But like this Valkyrie, for example, he has 23 attack. That does like 10 damage to Percival. He gets 6 hit KO'd by that Valkyrie. That's the strongest enemy on the map probably, besides maybe that Valkyrie. It's the same attack. So yeah, that's the point. He's that good. What's up? It's your boy Garret. I forgot we had 3 characters in this one. Damn. Garret.
Oh yeah.
He has almost as much as HP as Gonzalez, and a pretty good amount of strength. Everything else is a little bit lacking. I actually think his skill looks surprisingly good to me now that I'm looking at his stats. But everything else is a fair bit worse. But he's still a Berserker, and Berserker's a really good class. And he has this C rank in Axis, so it's still enough to use Killer Axis, which is honestly all he needs. He's not going to be able to use Armads like Gonzalez can, but other than that, he can replicate a lot of the utility for a lot less effort, because we've been training Gonzalez for quite a few maps, and it's only been recently that he really popped off. And Garret gives you like, I would say about 60 to 70% of Gonzalez's utility, but for basically free. Again, thanks to Harpman bonuses being pretty relevant here. And that's pretty good, I think, for a unit that requires no work that goes into it. Garret used to be one of these units that was like really underappreciated, I think, for like just looking bad. Probably having bad growth was like a really big cause of it. Now I think people look at him a little bit more favorably. I still wouldn't put him on like what I would call an endgame team, but there's definitely chapters where Garret, even if you haven't used them at all, is still a pretty good deployments and better than your alternatives. I particularly like the peak walking in chapter 21 and a couple of other maps. There's a lot of like funny things you can do with that, either through using the avoid bonus to your advantage, or the defense bonus, or just going in stealth mode for a couple turns, trying to like distract reinforcements, that kind of things. So I think Garret is kind of nice. Not the best unit ever, but for the amount of effort you put into him, pretty good.
For sure, he's not the ball of stats that Percival is. I think like kind of not to be overly pessimistic, but I can anticipate some of the reasons that people didn't like him for, and those were like, you know, low growths on normal mode, pretty low bases, also C rank axes are like, those all make him look unattractive until you realize, well, C rank axes enough to use killer axes and hand axes and effective weaponry. Like that's the most important stuff you can give him. Oh no brave axe, no silver axe, what a tragedy. But also like his stats aren't really that bad, to be honest with you. Like there's still plenty that he can do. Even this is like 16 skill is great, 21 strength is great, 11 speed is enough to not get doubled and even double some enemies. I think low con could also be an issue. Like 13, I say low con with like air quotes on it, but like just like there are some axes you can give him that would weigh him down significantly to the point of getting doubled. Super fine unit. If he's like he's probably a candidate for one of your top 10 or top 11 or top 12 units, which means he could get a deployment slot, and you should consider him for those roles. So, and around this point, depends on how many axes you've been using, you might actually just have a lot of axes and convoy, so that could be another reason to deploy him. Fair unit.
I feel very called out right now.
Oh, what?
With my full convoy and everything. But yeah, Faz here just joins in the press menu. You gotta remember to deploy her because she's super good to have around in this map and a couple of others, even if you don't train her. But she is very tempting to train because I looked up her growths for once because I had to remember how exciting they are. She's got 130% HP growth, which means she'll get HP all the time when she levels up, and then 30% of the time she'll get 2 HP. So she'll go straight from 16 to 18, for instance. And then her normal stats look pretty bad if you don't take into account the Dragonstone bonuses, but she gets Dragonstone bonuses, and so they are a lot stronger. Kind of the whole theme of Manaketes, really. And on top of that, she also has like really good growth in other areas, like 90% attack, 85% skill, 65% speed. Unfortunately, her speed is not boosted by the Dragonstone, so she is quite slow. But you can use that to your advantage, or just have her finish enemies off with her high might. And then her luck growth is also over 100%, 150. So Fa is really fun to train. The bad part about Fa, or rather the unfun, annoying part about Fa is her Dragonstone. Her Divine Stone only has 30 uses, so you can only attack with her 30 times total. I guess that's why they made her so slow, so she doesn't double and she doesn't lose 2 uses in one go, because then she'd deplete even faster. But as is, Fa is pretty strong at just like finishing enemies off, and she's really good against mages because of her insanely high resistance stat. And then on top of that, she can distract enemy magic users and status stats users by being at the bottom of the deployment order. And I might use that to my advantage sometimes. I know that depending on what kind of enemies you're trying to distract, raising her can actually hurt you for those things. So probably not gonna like fear all the way to level 20 as soon as I can, but I'm like every now and then you gotta show off the chicken Fa because she's so much fun to use and so fun to show off. One of the best animations in the whole game, if not the whole series. So fun unit with some fun utility. I like Fa a lot. What about you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I do think like as I've gotten better at the game, the whole like putting her in the lowest deployment slot to bait out status stabs or siege tomes or whatever has become a more common play for me. For sure, it's like, okay, well this is actually just like objectively really good utility. Casually play though, however, I just treat her like, you know, like she's a gun with 30 silver bullets in it, alright? Like find the 30 strongest enemies of the game you want to get rid of and just throw Fa at her. She'll be totally fine. I will say that there is a whole thing about like, oh, is Fa required for the ending? Is Fa required for like the true ending, the final map, or whatever? She is required for the true ending cutscene, but not for the final map. So you can actually play all the games, but if you want a cutscene in the end, Fa is required. And like without getting too far ahead of it, don't worry about needing to train Fa for anything. Her bases are totally fine for literally any stage of the game. It's super good.
Yeah. She is force deployed in the final chapter where I think at base she does not want to kill Manaketes, and so she will die if she goes up against them. Like you can test her out a bit against the Manaketes in this chapter. She has effective damage against them, but she doesn't like outright kill them at base, I don't believe. So You need some training for that, but you do not need to have her see combat ever if you don't want to. So you wouldn't have to worry about it too much. Nice.
All right, let's see what we got.
Let's see what we got.
For 5,000 gold.
I think almost every Fire Emblem game has a character that's recruitable for gold, but I think this is one of the best implemented ones, one of the funniest ones, where I didn't check the stats at the start of the map. I might have flashed him every once in a while, but every time you negotiate his gold amounts one step down, all of his stats, besides like Constitution and Move, obviously, go down by 1. So I think he has 4 different tiers: 10,000, 8,000, 6,000, 5,000. So it could have been +4 compared to what he has now. And honestly, I don't really like any stat set for you. I don't think any of them are worth the money if you're looking to like get bang for your buck, because no matter what his stats are, it's kind of mediocre. They're workable, especially because he's like instantly promotable, and the stage promotion bonus is pretty good. For level 15, instant promotion is pretty fair to do, I think, because his XP gain is pretty low. But I already have a 4-blaze user, so I don't really have a high demand for mages in the first place. And I think his particular speed is a bit low. I did play FE6 Reverse Recruitment before, where he joined a lot earlier and without any kind of gold requirements. He just replaced one of the Chapter 2 recruitables, and there he was like pretty alright to have for most of the game, but nothing special. So I kind of know how he is, even though I used him in a way different setting. He's okay, but I would always recommend the other mages over him, and even most characters. But I do really love the fact that his stats change depending on how much you pay him. I think he's a really funny character in that way.
Oh, it's super funny. He does also join with a member card, which is pretty important. So you either have to recruit him or you have to steal it from him if you want to go to any of the secret shops.
Raisins
There's only 2 in the game.
About this?
That's very
It's the
good.
most memorable part of Hugh for you, I guess.
I know, it's like not recruiting him. Actually, I will say I use Hugh a lot.
Oh.
Most casual playthroughs I'll end up using and training Hugh. I don't know, just because he's a funny mage and like he's level 15. And I'm like, this map is already slow enough, right? Like I might as well make it slower by training Hugh to level 20, right? Like,
Works.
we're already committed to being here for ages.
Yes, you're here forever, remember. Sword rank?
I was like, what did... Okay, what up? Okay, we got Zeiss. Oh.
Little brother. It's Zeiss. Oh, we actually have unit allowances left. Wow. Yay.
Oh, no.
Good shit. So I talked about this in Unit Feel a while ago, but Zeiss is a very memorable character for me in FE6 because I recruited him very early, so his character deployment orders were swapped around. And Zeiss joined in Chapter 2 or so, and his accuracy was downright garbage because the 13th skill he has here looks really good, but this was him leveled down a little bit, and he didn't have the harbor bonus that he does. I think he has literally 9 or 10 levels of harbor bonuses. It's an insane amount, so he gets a huge amount of strength, and then some like of the rest of stuff, like a little bit of defense and everything else, like 1 or 2 points, I think. But his skill is not that good at the level he joined at, so he was missing all the time to the point where it missing itself became a huge meme. And that was really enjoyable and also really frustrating. Vanilla, I actually haven't used Zeiss all that much. I like that he's sort of trainable, but not as super weak of a start as like Lilina or Nino or Est from Fire Emblem, any game that she's in. He's just kind of like goodish at base, but still obviously has some work to do. The main things he suffers from at base are low speed, so he doesn't double a whole lot, and low luck, I guess, and low res, I guess, but more importantly, D-rank classes. I think this is really bad for him. You saw how much we've been using killer weapons because they're so good and they're C-rank, so the fact that he can't use those is a huge disadvantage for using him compared to other units that you have at this point. Because, first of all, they're really accurate, whereas Iron, I think we showed that killer is more accurate than Iron by like 5 points, and in addition, it's also stronger. So if Zeiss wants to have more might, he needs to use Steel, which is god-awful. He's like 55 hit with it.
Yeah, I know.
And everything. It's frustrating as hell. And you also don't get extra weapon XP in this game from attacking with a Steel or anything, so his lance rank rises a bit slowly until you promote him. And there's the other dilemma with him, I feel like, where you want to take advantage of low XP gain to get a bunch of good levels in. He's going to cap his strength, sure, but you want to get some speed maybe, or some defense. But by keeping on promoted, you're probably delaying him hitting C lances, so he's going to take advantage of that boost to his promotion for a shorter time, because you're forced to deal with the 7 move Cs with the lesser stats for a big portion of the game. So it's a bit of a difficult trade-off, I think. So even though he and Heath are like very similar in a lot of ways, that are both wyverns that joins an enemy a bit unleveled, at like level 7 exactly, I think feel like Zeiss is a very different unit, and for that reason not as good, particularly because of the speed and the lack of lance rank. But still a very serviceable unit if you do train him. I do like him once he's been trained, and the Wyvern class in general is just super busted. A bulky flyer. He also has like really good aid compared to Milady because he's a male, so he can rescue more people.
True.
He's never going to rescue Gonzalez or anything, but everything below that, everything in the weight classes below that, he'll be able to pick up. And
he will lose 2-8 on promotion.
Yeah, because he gets 2 con, right? But I guess that still comes with the advantage of not losing speed from javelins anymore, so I can't even be complaining about that. That's my impression of Zeiss. What about you?
So, Mecca, I got a question for you. Want to train Zeiss?
I mean, we're kind of done training other units, so if I have the slots for him, maybe we can
like,
see
Zeiss
bench like 6.
We could just bench at green.
True.
Bench at green, buy a whip. Support him with
we have
Milady.
to buy a whip?
I think so, because we failed to get
we sold
Tate's
a whip,
right?
Oh, right.
We sold a whip.
We missed a whip. We get 3 total then, right? And then we sold one, we missed another. Yeah, we might have to buy one for him.
It's okay, we got silver card and number card. We can do it.
Oh, okay. I'm down for the challenge. I mean, if
Nice.
it doesn't work, I can always train Shan at the level 10 and promote her.
There you go. I was like, I could talk about Zeiss, where it's like, we could just show it off.
Yeah. I will consider it. It is nice to have a training project online. And like, once Lilina became competent, we started using Gonzalez, and then once Gonzalez became competent, we resumed training Lyn for like the 5th time.
Yeah.
So I guess it's nice to have another. Yeah, I see why not, especially with Fa being glitched. I guess this is the most fun unit we have that can train up, right? I mean, besides 40 speed U or 40 magic U.
Yeah, no, we're not training him.
All right, fair enough. All right, we'll go with it. Is that your analysis? Let's train.
Sure. I think like in general, I've used these a couple times on normal mode and on hard mode, to be honest with you, and you're pretty much right. Accuracy is the main issue. Speed is kind of another issue. You can sort of fix both of them by just using Iron Lances and Slim Lances. I mean, like, look, this guy's got 19 strength. He'll do damage with an Iron or a Slim. So he'll be fine. There's plenty of things he can damage if you just find him. Also, yeah, the whole no kill Lance rank is kind of garbage, but he's only 3 levels away from promo, and like the enemies around you are level 15, 16, whatnot. So you're gonna get XP very quickly. You'll get the promotion in like 6 kills.
Yeah, but that's if you want to promote him at 10, which, I mean, I guess that might be the most optimal way to use him overall, but I haven't experimented with that a whole lot.
Once he gets to level 10, of course, you have the option to promote.
Yes, he gets to, of course, he gets to.
You get to promote.
Yeah, we do get Douglas. It's as if moving up this tower was tedious enough, we also get a 5-move general to work with. But hey, at least his bases are pretty alright.
That's true.
Douglas is the last of the 3 Etrurian generals that we recruit, I believe. We had Cecilia and Percival, and this is the last one, Douglas. And he is just about as stereotypical, talking is difficult, actually, even if you're calmer than usual. Mm-hmm. He's stereotypically general, because high defense, high strength, high HP, and everything else, he's kind of forgot about it. I guess he has very high constitution too, a 17 con. I think he's harder to pick up than Gonzalez right now. Gonzalez, he's not deployed, but I think he has 16 con. And he has A ranks in both weapon types, as fits a general that's based on combat. I find that Douglas, sometimes there's use for him. Sometimes you want a giant chunk of a unit, kind of like Wallace in FE7. You just want someone who can block choke points or maybe rescue someone and just shrug off the enemies. Kind of like Barth, there are some places where he can come in handy. But you do have to be careful with these units because FE6 is, more than most other games, very skilled at mixing in different enemies that have different weapons. Reaper weapons can sometimes put the hurt in on you if a guy has like a Lance Reaper, for example, that can sometimes do damage to you. Or worse, magic or armor slayers. So that sometimes throws a wrench in your plans. But there are also a lot of enemies that just bounce off of Douglas, even if he like gets doubled technically because of 8 speed. So he can be an effective wall, but the high constitution and the high movement makes it a bit hard to get around. And usually we have units that are like slightly less durable, but durable enough to where it can take multiple beatings over a couple turns, maybe with a heal here and there, to where that tanking ability doesn't really come into play all that much. So it depends on your playstyle a bit, how useful he is. I don't find him great, but sometimes you have a spare deployment slot and he can come in handy. Generally, I don't find him super useful though. What about you?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it does depend on your playstyle. I know a lot of people who deploy Douglas, find a lot of use out of him, find a lot of use out of the 20 defense and the 46 HP. Because those are really good values for those stats if you need someone with high defenses and like strength and skill and the ability to hit attacks. Yeah, Douglas is really great. If you end up never deploying him, I don't really blame you either. a lot of people just don't like generals, don't like armor knights, don't like 5 move, they don't like low res. I'd say use them if you like them. There are probably plenty of instances where deploying him works and deploying him's fine. I can't really think of any instance where he does the job that he does absolutely 100% better than any other unit that you could put in that situation. But he's still a cool dude. Definitely, like, no reason to condemn him as bad. No reason to praise him as good. He's like probably exactly in the middle of the game, if you ask me.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I will point out if I see a spot where I think Douglas would or could have been useful at some point. I know there's like 1 or 2 where I would put it out. And then I have Nime here, our new character. So I guess we can talk about her real quick. So that's out of the way. Let me get the growth up here. So I think Nime is a fascinating character because back in the day, she was considered really bad. Because what did people look at back in the day? They looked at your base level, your base stats, and your growths. And for all those, I mean, I guess they didn't really look at your base stats very hard because they mostly focus on the fact that Nime has absolutely horrendous growth and only 2 levels to go. And they were like, well, if you trained Ray or Sophia to this level, they'd be much better and they still have better levels. And Nime has no room to grow because she only has 2 levels. And I guess it just completely skipped on the fact that her bases are pretty amazing for what she needs to do, which is most importantly like have good magic to use staves and maybe hit an enemy really hard with like Flux or Nosferatu. And that's really all she needs to do. And then later on Apocalypse. And she does all those things greatly. And that's mostly helped by her amazing weapon ranks. Nime's best trait by far, A-rank staffs. Be able to use any staff we want. We've used Warp a couple times already. We've shown a lot of other utility staffs like Restore and Barrier. Nime can use them all. She uses them really well. She has probably the biggest warp range in your army unless you like have an RNG abused stall or something like that. And that utility is amazing. You do need to protect her a little bit because she does have fairly low HP and defense. We get an Angelic Robe in a couple chapters from now. I think like after the end of next chapter that we can use on her to make her more sturdy if we want to. I'm pretty sure I would like to use Nime for a while at least because she's basically free good utility. And with that robe, she can at least survive 1 hit from most enemies and a Nosferatu tank her way to victory. Also would have been a pretty good candidate for that body ring that I spent on Lyn. So if it didn't go to her, I would put it on her. Because if I didn't put it on Lyn, I would put it on Nime. Because that way she can use Flux without losing speed. And Nosferatu also without losing speed. Because they're pretty light in this game. Also something I like about Nime is their starting inventory is really good for Fire Emblem. Like usually I'm kind of annoyed with starting inventories in characters that join like right as the map starts. Because they have like, I don't know, Steel Lance Javelin or something. I want to give them like a bunch of other good stuff. But Nime has roughly what I would give her if I was to deploy her from the preps menu. Which is like a weapon for 1 to range, just Flux. Physic and a heal, and then the Eclipse is like whatever, I could sell it I guess, or keep it around, but it's not very useful for right now. All I want to give her right now is a Restore Drive, and I mean, I got that prepared over here, right here, so yeah,
Nice.
we're pretty good in that regard. So yeah, Nime good. What do you think?
Oh, Nime good. You pretty much said it all. Bundle of utility. The A-rank stabs, the A-rank dark, essentially means, in particular, she's probably your best warper, like the moment she arrives. And that alone is going to be exceptionally useful. Maybe not necessarily in this map, because you can only warp to places where you have vision in the Fog of War. But even honestly on this map, warping someone just over the mountains, warping someone just over the second mountain range to the east, which we haven't encountered yet. But like any kind of warp, Nime is probably going to be your best candidate for it. I do agree that like just treat her as if she doesn't have any growth and is not going to get any level ups, and she's still pretty fine. 25 HP kind of crumbles to most things. It's kind of interesting you suggest the Angelic Robe. I've actually never done that sort of thing on Nime, but I just like keep her out of combat to begin with. So I think what you're doing, like I think what you're doing is like actually a lot better, because it kind of unlocks some additional utility out of a character that already has a lot. I will say Eclipse, you're like, whatever, Eclipse, I'll just sell it. You can totally sell Eclipse, however, there are really good uses for Eclipse that may be coming up very soon. We'll talk about them when we get there.
Yeah, fair enough. Are you thinking like wall breaking?
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the other thing I would sometimes use Eclipse for. I tend to like, I don't know, I don't use it very much. Just take away Eclipse so I can't accidentally use it in this map, because I don't think I want to use it in this map. It only has 10 hits, so it's like really awful for anything but wall breaking, I find.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you get that. And I want to give her Restore because, well, she's pretty good at restoring people. Nime is on the bottom of the deployment order, so the enemy sleep staff user over here will probably target her like every time. So we gotta get rid of him too. All right,
Juno.
Time for some 1 hour in unit analysis. Am I right?
No.
Okay, I don't think there's much to say on her though, but I do think she's interesting because she's not one of those units that used to be rated as one of the worst in the game. I never realized that she can fly and rescue drop without any training with 8 move, without needing a promotion item or anything. And she turned into one of the worst units in the game, but not the worst, because it's still not a lot of utility, but there's one chapter in particular that's coming up there where she can be a pretty good deploy for basically free because she gets so many deployment slots in chapter 21. That's kind of about it. There's not much else that she can do, but we've seen throughout this whole thing how useful rescue dropping can be in weird situations, and it's something that you can do regardless of your stats. But her stats herself are not good. Her strength and speed in particular are pretty bad. Her HP and defense too is just not great. It's good enough to survive 1 hit usually, just not 2 of any remotely threatening enemy. But it's okay. Like, you can count on her to survive like a hit if you needed to, and that's about it. Everything else is kind of whatever. But she has some useful utility going on, and it kind of stops there. I like using her when I can, just to show that she can be useful. But if you want to see Yuno being good, I recommend you watch FE6 First Recruitment, because that's where she replaces Marcus, and that makes her really, really good. But in vanilla, she's just kind of useful when she's around. But in tier list, I don't put her very high. She's okay. She's all right.
Yeah. Her low growths made her probably better in reverse recruitment too, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Her bases must have been through the roof.
Yeah, they were like this -2 and everything, I think, roughly.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad at all. Yeah, I mean, like, you basically said it. She rescues and has Kanto.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all she has going for her, really. I guess, like, the whole flying thing is like, oh, you can use Juno to fly someone over a cliff. I've not really seen that be used in 21, because every like cliff has a bunch of enemies past, so it's like, I don't want to send Juno there. I'll just warp. But
yeah.
No. I guess, like, when compared to Diane, who's always the natural person to compare her against, it's like she has the more utility, whereas Diane has the more combat. But honestly, I don't even know if that's true. Like, she has 8 moves, she has Kanto, she can rescue, she can open chests. I think that's going to be the most she's going to do all run.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now Becca's going to like deploy her out of spite in 21. But
I might, just because I can. It's not that spectacular, but the way I sometimes tackle 21 is I just take my time a bit to remove those enemies you talked about, and then it gets a little bit more. You can do a lot more with your units if their stats don't matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Okay, first person in the world who gets rescued by Ellen. I have one more combat-related move to make, and that's getting Lyn to kill the Sage so she doesn't ambush us from behind. Use the Silver Bow for guaranteed 2 weapon XP, because we're halfway through to Merglaze. Speaking of which, we have the Merglaze on here, so I guess we should review the Merglaze as well as everything else that comes with it. Good old Yoder.
Yeah, I think the unit that comes with Merglaze.
So, Merglaze, I'll just call him by his real name that his mom gave him, Yoder. I find it hard to really appreciate Yoder sometimes because he's a bit overshadowed by Nime for me. Nime has more magic and a more unique magic type, whereas Yoder is just a bishop with... I mean, it's just not as exciting for me for some reason. He joins later. I guess that's the main thing. It's just Nime can do stuff for you for more chapters, so I'm always seeing him as a bit of a budget Nime. But, you know, Nime is such a good brand that I don't mind that we have a budget Nime, because this is still really good. Still really high staff rank, and still going off that same generous FE6 staff formula that we have, where this guy using any staff, honestly, is helpful already, and it comes for completely free. So I'm just not going to name them all, but just the ones that I can come up with in my head real quick. Warp, Rescue, Restore, Physic, Hammern. But most importantly, in his case, the Saint Staff, which is an S-rank staff that it's not his personal staff, but not many units actually reach S-rank staffs. It's pretty hard to build weapon XP in this game. Nime might have it at this point if you use staff spamming a lot. If you use someone like Saul or Ellen or Clarine, they probably have it at this point. But someone like Cecilia, for example, is not going to reach it. Someone like Lugh or Lilina, they're not going to reach this. So this might just be exclusive utility to him. And this is an amazing staff for emergencies. It says it just restores all HP, but I'm pretty sure that it also repairs all status ailments. So sleep, berserk, all that stuff that's very common in this game. Not in this chapter, but a couple chapters from now on. It's really common and really annoying, especially if they're out of your range, because Restore is a one-range staff. So having this available to just cure all problems on your army currently, with just one click of a button, one turn by one unit, is super good, and I love it. I'm going to use it in chapter 23 specifically, I'm pretty sure. And I might also use it for emergencies earlier than that. So this is a great thing. You don't need it intact to get the good ending, even though it's an S-rank thing.
Yeah, I was about to bring that one up.
Yeah, but that's like, I was like a use misconception for a while. So you can just like use it to your heart's content until you get to that feel, if you ever want to use 3 uses before him. So yeah, Saint Staff is great. Yoder's capped, so his growths don't really matter, but I think he has him anyway, so I'm putting him on the screen. But a base's utility is just absolutely great, and I'm going to use him in Nime for every chapter I have slots for them, basically. That's my plan.
Yeah, I do love Yoder. He's got that funny 30 res. I mean, like, come on, how many times do you have a unit join with a cap stat? Right? Like, okay, I guess like some guys like actually Athos. I'm like, okay, yeah. I know. But who was the first Athos? It's actually Godo. But who was the Godo in front of us now? It's Yoder. Okay, I really do like Yoder. Again, even though he's probably overshadowed by some characters, he's still probably worth a deployment slot in the maps coming up, right? And I oftentimes do. I'm like, hey, you know what? You know what would be great? Someone with like S-rank stabs, the ability to use physic, the ability to do this and that. Like 19 magic. Honestly, these other stats aren't too shabby either, right? Like 19 magic, that can hit. Like that can hit, that can warp, that can physic from far away. 14 speed probably gets doubled by everything, and 5 defense is actually laughable. But like, come on, just like don't put him next to a Swordmaster 5-head. Like, come on, what do you?
That's true. I don't know if you were done, but you could probably play if you have any more to say on Yoder.
No, I don't have much more to say.
The thing with Yoder for me is like he has 14 speed, so if he gets doubled, he's probably dead. But if he doesn't get doubled, he generally didn't take a hit. 35 HP is not terrible. So I think he survives a Wyvern Rider and sometimes a Wyvern Lord. I forgot what the stats exactly are. So usually he is fine. Just gotta be a bit careful. But like he's less fragile than Nime without a robe for sure.
It's definitely nice, by the way. If you had gone Ilia route, you would have gotten the Mergleys from the chapter, and instead Yoder would arrive with the multi.
Yeah,
which is the lance that we just got.
Karel, the hero of the Paper Blade, not the Lynding Blade, but the Paper Blade, my previous FE6 playthrough on my channel long ago, when he was the main lord because he joined first, but that was for first recruitments, and now he's joining last because this is somewhat normal FE6. And in this incarnation of FE6, I don't think he's a great character, but I do think he's a funny character. I think I had some interesting discussions on him on unit feel because he has these amazing growth and then he has 1 level to gain him, which I think is very appealing for people who haven't played the game, but as someone who has tried to level up Karel just to get footage of his level up, I actually find it pretty hard to do because the XP gain at level 19 is so slow. And I've always said that if Karel joined with like slightly higher bases, but completely normal growth for F6 standards, everyone would just kind of pass him by. But because he has that weird ass growth thing, everyone just loves like the theory of Karel. But he's interesting in his own right. His bases are good enough to like double most enemies. He has S rank in swords, so he can use the Durandal or just a Wormslayer if you want him to. And be fine for Garret in this game at this point in the game. The one drawback I'd like to bring up for Karel is that he hasn't had the time to use any boots yet. So if you want to make him really good for the final chapter, you're probably gonna have to save a couple boots for him. And it kind of feels bad to save those without using them, but you can in theory do it and just use them in this chapter, and then he's ready to go for the final chapter. And then he'd probably be about as good, a little bit worse than Rutger would be at this point in the game. And that's kind of really all you can do with him. You can probably one-on Wyverns and Manaketes, which is kind of all you can ask for at this point in the game. I think his bulk might have some issues if you try to use him full-time, but other than that, he's a fine Goto-ish character that can perform fine at base level without any investments. But I don't think he's spectacular, and I won't say he's as good as someone like the Laguz Royals from FE10, or Athos from FE7, or even Myr from FE8. But he has his place in FE6, I think he's funny, and I like him. Have you ever used him?
Oh yeah, when I get here, I usually do try and get that level up, because like my team's strong enough anyway that I can kind of afford to feed him a ton of XP. And obviously getting the level up is very fun, and it's cool to see the numbers go up. But yeah, objectively speaking, like you said, it's nothing really spectacular. You know, I think what you say, if you just increased all of his base stats by 1 and then like reduced his crits by 100 so that they're like actually normal, yeah, you're right, you just have like a pretty unspectacular unit. But yeah, he does join with Durandal rank, he does join with crit plus 30. Like these are already good things that can make any unit fine in Binding Blade. And like don't feel like ashamed that you're going to let like Father Mecha down or something if you bring him to final chapter. It's like, if he's your strongest unit for final chapter, like bring him. You know, it like if he's a good unit for final, bring him. If he's not a good unit for final, don't bring him. Just by this point, you don't have to consider things like training or long-term investment. You just have the stats that you have, and you can just make decisions purely based off of the short term, because that's the only term remaining, I guess. So
that's one way to phrase it. Yeah, I actually wonder, maybe if you played like an Iron Man and you have not been doing so well up to this point, then Karel could actually be like a very valuable addition to your team. That could actually be a lifesaver. Or what if you're playing like negative growths? Actually, in that case, he would probably be pretty good. Actually, I would be interested in that. I don't remember if anyone ever tried negative growths FE6. I know there's like a lot of masochists out there who could probably do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone has tried, but I would not, you know, recommend it to anyone because 0% growth is already pretty miserable in this game. Alright, next unit we gotta go over is Boars, and I'm gonna drop a hot take here. I think Boars is the best unpromoted Armor Knight in Fire Emblem 6, the Binding Blade, because he has like 5 chapters of free utility before you get like the option to not deploy him anymore, and when it comes at like an opportunity cost. But before that, everything Boars does is for free, so even if it's just rescue dropping 1 unit, or visiting 1 village, or taking 1 hit so that someone else doesn't have to, that helps, and that lands them solidly into the upper echelons of some of the lower tiers, in my opinion. And that's kind of where it ends. Like, the other thing about Boars that I think is really cool is triangle attack happens later on. You can like have him and his sister and his captain Barth like gang up on one enemy with triangle attack for 100% hit, 100% crit. And then other than that, it's like just Armor Knight stuff. I guess the big thing with me with Boars for like actual combat utility is he has very low speed to the point where like enemies will actually double him, and you know, when you take less damage than other units, that's great and fine. But when they then double attack, they deal twice as much damage, and it often ends up being roughly the same thing. Like, there was a lot of enemies that kill Boars the same amount of combats as Roy, even though Roy's defense is much worse. And part of that is his low speed, and part of it is just the low HP he has. Like, 20 HP is not a whole lot. So I remember the first time I played this game, I actually really enjoyed using Boars on normal mode, but I was very disappointed that he was not Oswin. I think that's the biggest shoes he has to fill, is like he's being compared to Oswin a lot in my mind, and that kind of hurts him. But you know, I did call him, you know, I did call General like one of the best classes, and did call Boars one of the best units in my very, very old Fire Emblem 6 character guide for hard mode. So there's probably something to it, but I'm not seeing it anymore. I lost sight of how good he is, apparently. What is your experience with Boars?
You lost sight. You had the rose-colored glasses on.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I do think General is a good class, and like I do think Boars is an okay unit. But I mean, like, dude, Mecca, I got a riddle for you.
Oh no.
Okay, so like, if you're say you're like walking to work one day, right, and it's like a 15-minute walk to work, and then on the first minute, a bird like lands on you and like pecks you in the head a bunch, right, and then it like stays with you the whole time, and then it like poops on you as it leaves, and then like actually decides to like, after all that, you get to your office and the bird is still there. Would you be like, wow, I got all that for free?
Is it still about Fire Emblem?
Yeah, because that's what Boars is doing, bro. You're like, oh man, I got all that for free. It's like, what do you mean? He's like causing you all this pain. He gets one-rounded
Boars
by
never
everything.
pooped on my
like,
shoulder.
He gets one-rounded for free, bro.
Let's just don't get him one-rounded, bro.
He moves 4 spaces for free. No, I'm kidding. But like, I don't know. I understand that he quote-unquote does all these things for free, but it's like, these aren't good things he's doing, man. He's like inconveniencing you. He's making you do math. I think he's a fun unit if you want to use him. Absolutely, he's got enough defense to not die to some units in the game. By all means.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible to use Boars without him inconveniencing you during his free deployment? Because I think it is.
Okay, yeah, fair enough, it is. Like, there are a few places where you can do it. There are a few places. Like, if we leave Boars' screen right here, right?
Yeah.
You know? We could probably go over and attack an archer in melee, right? Like, where's the first archer?
Somewhere around here. I think yeah.
There we go. I think we can surround this archer and attack him in melee with Boars until Boars kills him. I think that would get him up to like level. We'd get like 70 XP out of that. Yeah, I'll give you that.
True. I was thinking along the lines of like, okay, you just rescue drop like Marcus on the 40 chapter 2, or you fight like a soldier chapter 3 at the starting point without him dying. Mm-hmm. That seems good, right?
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. So there are like a lot of small places where certainly Boars can be useful, and if you want to train him and he ends up being a good unit and you're having fun, by all means keep using them. I just think, you know, a unit, if we're talking about like the best Armor Knight, I think a unit like Barth, who just shows up ready to go and doesn't have as many of those issues, might be a bit better. But like,
Yeah.
this is me nitpicking. Boars is fine. Boars is fine.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, I'll be
use them
fair.
and have
Like,
fun.
there's not
Use them
that
and
many
have
places where he helps you like that for free, and I think there's merit to using Barth over Boars if you prefer, or like I said, use all armor nets and triangles like something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
This is me just here. I'm like, oh, he's the best armor knight because he does all this for free. I'm like, well, does he though? No, he's super fun. He's super fun to use. Actually, on my first tournament playthrough, I used Bard. Boars. That's the unit I used. I actually used Boars, and he got like 3 or 4 pretty much perfect levels in a row. I'm like, holy crap, this unit's so good. He was like on my endgame team and everything. And then I think as I started playing FE6 more, I'm like, wait a minute, why isn't this guy still good? But like if he can't double and he's got 11 defense and 20 HP, it's like it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to be just a stellar unit with stats like these.
yeah, it's an acquired taste in a way, but
Sure.
it can be fun.